Like to call to order our board meeting for June 9th. It is 7:10 p.m. and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you all can join us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So let the record show that we have all 5 trustees in attendance today. We don't have our student board trustees. And if I can get a motion to approve.
Actually, I'd like to pull 11.5 from the agenda, please.
Under consolidate.
Yes.
Do I have a motion with that amendment?
Oh, I'm sorry. We just took it out already.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. There was an agenda item on there, but it's not on there before we posted, so we don't need to pull 11.5.
Okay, so we can approve as.
Yes.
Motion to approve. Thank you, Thea. Do I have a second? Thank you, Alex. Moved by Thea, seconded by Alex. Board, all in favor to approve the agenda? Aye. I vote. Okay, in closed session, the board took action and voted 5-0 to approve an amended compromise with parents of a student to resolve potential and threatened claims against the district. The amended agreement would include reimbursable expenses for transportation to the student's private school placement. The board also took action and voted 5-0 to approve the positive evaluation of the superintendent. And so that takes us to communications. If we have any board member reports, I have one, but if Steve, if you want to start, do you have any?
Sure. I attended the inaugural Mountain View State of the City. While the city has provided annual updates in the past, this was the first time the event was held in the evening and free to the public. The hall was full, and I saw many people, including those at my table, attending a city council event for the first time. If you're interested in staying informed about city council, you can visit mountainview.gov to sign up for monthly newsletters and event summaries. My family and I also attended Mountain View's first citywide Pride celebration. The event featured music, dance, a bouncy slide, and booths, many of which you'd find at any city-sponsored event. I picked up a Pride sticker for my laptop. As a reminder, the US Supreme Court has ruled that Pride flags specifically are protected under the First Amendment. Last but not least, I had the privilege, as many of you did, of handing out diplomas or shaking hands at the graduations for the adult school, Alta Vista High and Los Altos High. It's always an honor to celebrate these milestones with our students and families. I wish all our graduates the very best in their next chapter.
Okay, I wanted to say a few words on the Mountain View High School graduation ceremony, which I attended. Hugely important event. In some ways, we are all here for that particular event, graduation, the culmination of students' past and success, and sort of this transition to the next milestone or to the next stage of life. So first of all, I'll say that as a board member, that is such an important and touching ceremony. I was so happy to see how excited the students were, how supportive the parents and the oral community were, and hearing all the cheers was just amazing. So big congrats to all of our students who graduated. Best of luck in their journey post high school. And I very much look forward to the next graduation ceremony.
I just want to add that it is such a pleasure to see everyone graduate at the end of the year. And it does my heart good, but I'm sure.
Does all the hearts good of the students that are moving on, as well as all their parents. And I'm so proud that our district graduated so many students, over 500 at each campus. The comprehensive campuses, as well as the Alta Vista, and as well as the adult students. And so it's important to continue education in your whole life, and the adult school proves that many people can and do that. So congratulations to everyone.
I also attended Mountain View graduation event, and it was fun, and it's definitely an honor. However, I learned and I was thinking about the fact that I know the students have advisors, right, that take them from their freshman year all the way to their senior year, and then the process repeats. I wonder if advisors deserve a better right to hand out the diploma, because in reality, they are the ones who are spending more time with the students, and it's something that I think we should discuss in the future, whether why are the board members getting out diplomas? Should we honor give that honor to people who I believe deserve it a little more than we do. So anyway, just an FYI.
I also have a little joke. I got hit in the head with a graduation hat because you guys were so enthusiastic and I didn't duck, unlike the experienced people to my right. But really, that was quite fun. And honestly, my dog was actually quite amused by the whole thing and wagged his tail at me.
I think that's a good point, Vadim, and something we could certainly explore, because I think that would be really meaningful to the staff. I also just want to echo my fellow board members, and I got to go to Adult Ed, Alta Vista, and Los Altos, all really special, and each has their own sort of spirit to it. So just want to thank all the administrators and all the staff for including the board in those celebrations. We know it's a lot of work, a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of operations. So just thank you to all of you and your teams. And then I just have a second announcement that next time I come to a board meeting, will hopefully have baby at home. Today's my last board meeting before taking some time to wait for the baby and care for the baby. And so I look forward to joining the team up here again in October, tentatively. And we'll hand the gavel over to Theta to continue to make sure we kick off another successful school year and continue the work. So. Thank you. Ready, I think that concludes our board member reports, the superintendent report.
Okay, graduations again, wonderful job, principals. Our smaller schools, intimate ceremonies where we actually highlighted some of the accomplishments of our students. That was fantastic. Comprehensive sites. You lived up to the entrance song Pomp and Circumstance when it came to graduations. They were joyful celebrations, but they were also worthy of marking that time where a student no longer has to attend compulsory education and begins adulting. Right, Adam? So congratulations on that. Since our last board meeting, I was able to attend the freestyle end of year exhibition, as well as a number of other events. Speaking of freestyle, I was asked at this meeting not too long ago how much it would cost if we provided transportation 3 times a day. And we did get a bid. Thank you, business office, for getting that. The cost would go from $47,000 a year to provide that midday transportation to $183,000. That was the low bid. We got 2 other bids that were higher. So it is a significant increase in cost if that is a direction that we want to go. I'm not so sure that it would increase the enrollment. Because students would just have to get to their home sites earlier. We still have the challenges with different bell schedules on our A, B, and C days, which is part of what makes it wonky as far as transportation. And also, I was invited to a sports awards night at Los Altos High School to see, and you're going to hear from some fantastic MSAC members a little bit later this evening. But I got to see one of our MSAC members receive a special award for earning 12 varsity letters in athletics. So she played 3 sports a year for 4 years. Every single sport was varsity in tennis, soccer, and lacrosse. And her weighted GPA was 4.41 while she was doing it. So she did receive a special. I just wanted to highlight that. And then I just want to say before I turn it over to the principals, everyone have a great summer. And our first principal up tonight was our last one last time. This is Dr. Ranieri.
Good evening and congratulations, Dr. Ortiz. So just want to thank everyone who did come to the graduation. You know, it's always a bittersweet event and we enjoy putting them on. It takes a lot of time and energy because we do recognize that this is one of the only times that people in the community may come to our schools. And so we really want to make a good impression for our sites and for MVLA in general. So thank you for your participation in those. We are sad to see our seniors go and we are looking forward to next year. Thank you.
Dr. Glazer.
Thank you. I want to echo what Dr. Ranieri spoke about. I think that I want to also extend our appreciation to the staff and also the grounds crew who had to set up the field and also did a lot of upkeep. And it takes a lot of effort to make sure that every single one of those graduates feel seen and heard. So, and I want to thank the board members who participated in our graduation. And I'm looking forward to resting for the summer so we can get ready for the new school year. So thank you.
Ms. Wolfo.
Good evening, everyone. We had a hard-fought 23 in person on the Alta Vista stage with a handful of others that had graduated earlier and could not or weren't any longer in the area. We even had one student who worked from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. With Tesla, job that he had gotten through Alta Vista. And in any case, he couldn't make the graduation, but he still came that day so that he wouldn't be late to his second day of the shift. It's just great to see the transformation. And I would echo the grounds, in particular, Pedro and Trinidad, how they prepped, and it was so coordinated, and the technology, because Alta Vista, Bob is our tech crew. He just didn't know that, but he always is. And we run the mics and all those things, and it went wonderfully. So thank you. We had teachers that were in late into the evenings, weekends, working with students, which is a great thing to see, but it's a lot. We're getting ready for summer school. Looking right around that 550 for session 1, and it starts on Wednesday morning at Mountain View. Thank you to Mountain View. I checked all the rooms today, again, for Trinidad and crew, and Kip's notice and working with teachers. I would look in and I found myself saying, gorgeous. It's gorgeous, like that feeling. It's wonderful. So thank you.
Ms. Vo.
Good evening. I also want to thank the board members who were able to attend Adult Ed's graduation night last Wednesday, and also Mr. Volta. The students really appreciated it. And for some of them, this may be their only graduation that they have in their lives. So it was so important that you were there. It was our largest graduation since the start of the pandemic, with I think about 66 on stage and 142 graduates on the program. I wanted to thank Dr. Glazier and her team, John Rebel and Mike Grunari, for supporting the Adult Ed graduation behind the scenes. They're a great help, and they helped to make the event a success. And some highlights from the evening: Mr. Sanjay Deve was there to represent the Mountain View Rotary, presenting 2 scholarships for $3,500 to 2 of our exceptional grads. And also Ms. Ruby Main from Assemblymember Berman's office was there to present 15 certificates of recognition from the Assembly Member's office. Thank you.
That concludes superintendent's report.
Do we have anyone from CSEA, PTA?
No.
We have some public comment for items not on the agenda. Yes. Brooke Margin?
Close enough.
Oh.
Am I good?
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead.
cool. So I'm a teacher, so I'm used to booming. Yeah, I'm Brooke Mangan Hinckley. I teach history at Mountain View High School, and I'm here to offer up some heartfelt thanks for myself and several other teachers. There are 2 people in particular that I really want to acknowledge, Layla Benson being one of them, and Alex Heatherly, both of whom were absolutely instrumental in taking care of our children in the after school program. Layla started this, spearheaded this in the midst of COVID, when the daycares were shut down, and we wanted to be able to work. And of course, didn't know how we could make that happen logistically. And Layla took this on. She didn't have to, and she did. To make it easy for us to be able to come back to work and to know that our children had a safe place to be able to be. And she fought to continue that for years afterwards. And we were eventually so lucky to have Alex Heatherly take over and actually implement the after school program. And our children not only got to experience a place that was safe, but they were loved, they were celebrated, and the kindness that Alex showed all of us and our children, it just can't be measured. So we're sad to see the program go, but I just wanted to offer our thanks and celebration for those 2 people who made such a difference in my life personally and for so many of us. So I hope we can acknowledge their efforts. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to some resolutions. Let's start with 8.1.
I don't know if this needs any introduction from Mike, but this would allow the district to borrow from fund to fund and then pay the funds that we borrow out of back. Recommendation is to approve this resolution.
I move that we approve.
Second. Oh, sorry. Sorry to cut you off. Second.
Right.
What the levels
in terms of what? Say more about the ability who oversees it or who directs it or
who participates in the approval process? What happens if we are not able to pay the money back? Is there such possibility? What are the risks associated with it?
so yes, let me take a step back. The reason we would move money from one fund to another is really it's a cash flow challenge, right? And the way we receive money is not monthly from the state, but in big tranches from the county treasury due to local property taxes. So there are months where that dips low. And so to help pay those obligations out of the general fund, this annual resolution we do allows us to borrow money from other funds to meet that obligation, and then it gets transferred back or paid back later in the school year. So there's not a formal approval process to do it. This authorization is that to allow Elvis and I the discretion as we see our cash flow adjusting month to month to do what's needed. But all that is overseen by the County Office of Education and the County Controller's Office, who actually reviews that cash balance. We get monthly reports from the county office for cash balance. That's something our auditors look at as well each year when they audit financials. And then there's requirements that the funds are put back in the proper fund if there was intra-fund borrowing throughout the year.
The district doesn't need to be involved in this. I mean, it's good to hear that the county is overseeing this process. I'm just asking from the, like, how is it done
It's, well,
traditionally?
end of each year, an auditor comes in. And when auditors come in, unlike a business and they report to a board or what have you, which they still do, auditors have to report to the state to make sure that we have make sure that we have this resolution if we do borrow from one fund. And also that it goes back. So the auditors look for documentation to make sure that we are following the law. And if they don't, they're obligated by law to report to the state and report those findings.
That happens once a year, right?
Yes.
I'm asking when a decision is made that we need to move funds from a general fund to some other fund, with an expectation that we will be receiving income sooner enough, right? But who is overseeing that approval process?
The CBO.
Okay.
You're giving the CBO the authority to borrow funds within the school year as the need arises.
CBO, County Board of Education. Mike?
Certified business official, the chief business official.
I'm sorry, old lingo, Associate Superintendent of Business Services.
Okay, got it. So,
And the way to look at this that helps is the district, and later on we'll look at the all funds spreadsheet for the budget.
yeah,
All of that is district funds. But it's almost like different bank accounts you might have at your personal bank. And so it's all district funds, but if the general fund, because we're waiting for that, especially in late fall, is where it gets the balances get very low because we're waiting for that initial property tax revenue that property owners pay, and then the county provides to us. That's when there might be times we're not going out to borrow money from some other entity. It's really a transfer from, all right, there's a special reserve out there, Fund 17 or OPEB. You move it to Fund 01, general fund, because that's where you're writing the checks out to do the payroll every month. And then when the money we get from property taxes comes in, then it allows us to then transfer whatever money was originally transferred from one fund to the next, then we move it back to restore those funds. So those balances of all those funds are reconciled monthly with the county. They provide us the numbers if there's a discrepancy because of the date on which a transaction happened. We're always reconciling the county for that. So the County Office of Education, as well as the County Controller, two different entities, are helping with that reconciliation and management of those funds.
so CBO is the same person who makes this decision to transfer funds and actually executes the decision. Are there any risks involved? Like, is there anybody who oversees and says that's not a good idea, or we should be doing this, or we may not? I know nothing about the process. I'm just
Right, I think it's a greater risk if we don't give our head of the business office the authority to transfer funds. If we have a cash flow issue, depending on when that happens.
I guess my question: what would happen in this case? If we don't, and we have a cash flow issue.
If we have a cash flow issue, we can't pay our employees.
But this hasn't happened, right? Or this is
Because we have resolutions like this that allow us to borrow from one fund, put it in our general fund. And then when we receive the money from the county tax receipts, then we pay it back. It's a greater risk not to have this flexibility, to be completely honest, because if we have a cash flow issue And if we're talking about November before we receive the text, we only have one board meeting. And it could get dicey in terms of asking for this permission at that time.
So we've been doing this year over year. This is just for the next fiscal year.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
gonna say, it's an.
yeah.
And it's not unique to MVLA, community funded districts. The cash flow is less constant versus state funded districts, but it's a pretty typical mechanism. It really has to do with accounting rules rather than just freely transferring money. It actually having to do this resolution as part of that oversight and accountability, rather than a CPO or a fiscal director just doing it, ad hoc as needed.
Thanks for indulging questions
No,
from my
that's-
first time board member.
Yeah.
Third question.
They're good questions, and it's a common business practice, but because we're in education, we have to approve the same resolution every year to allow someone to do something that normally, if you're in a business, you would just transfer funds from one fund to another. But because we're a public entity, we have to vote to allow him to do his job, basically.
Okay,
And,
makes sense.
and at another time, we can show you without this or without the another resolution with a few meetings, tax revenue anticipatory note when we'd actually go negative. And that would be the month that we wouldn't meet payroll and we'd have a lot bigger bumps to deal with. So we have to project that and estimate it and show that to the county as well.
Okay, I'm good, thanks.
So I'll go with the original. Who moved it? Sorry. Catherine moved it and it was seconded by you, Vito, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. Remember?
Okay, that was right. Okay. Board, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0. Okay, and then we have the next resolution on the school year calendar.
And this is a resolution that we need to pass so that we have a week off in February. It's basically saying that we're not following the ed code in terms of when the holidays are actually supposed to be celebrated on. And I can pull up the ed code, but it allows us to recognize this 2 President's Days on the same week, so we can have that week off in February, midwinter
The
break.
dates are up there.
Right.
And on the resolution.
But there's actually rules as to when Lincoln's birthday has to be honored and Washington's, and this allows us to have the full week off as opposed to 2 3-day weekends or 1 4-day weekend. Recommendation is to approve. And this is whenever the calendar presents itself, a normal resolution.
I move that we approve the resolution to adjust the school year calendar to accommodate February holiday and our break.
All right, moved by Catherine, seconded by Alex. All those in favor? Okay. 5-0. To approve. 8.2, and then that takes us to 8.3.
8.3 is another yearly resolution regarding insufficiency of teachers. Obviously, we don't feel it as much in this district, but this is a declaration of need for fully qualified educators resolution. And this says if we can't find one, we can hire somebody that has emergency credentials, emergency permits. I don't know when the last person we hired on an emergency permit in this district. We tend to get large applicant pools, but this is a just in case kind of thing. Recommendation is to approve so that we don't have to come back in that emergency situation down the road.
I move that we also approve this resolution, declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
Moved by Catherine. Do we have a second? I second. Second by Alex. Board, all in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Okay. And that takes us to our presentation for today.
Awesome. We have a bunch of great students that are here that decided to spend their first day of summer with us. Some of the students in the MSAC looked at us with crazy when we asked them to show up tonight. And these dedicated individuals said, yes, I want to do this. And I'll let my partner in MSAC take it from here, Ms. Bissonette.
No. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It truly is my pleasure to be able to introduce this group to you tonight. It's always a special night when students are in the room. I am Michelle Bissonette. I work at the district doing communications and outreach and engagement. 2 years ago, we started the MVLA Student Advisory Council as a means to ensure that we had consistent student voice elevated to the district level to inform our work at the district level. And I'm sure it comes as no surprise that this is my favorite part of my job. The students we have in this district are truly extraordinary, as is evidenced by the fact that 7 of them are here tonight. 2 of them, Adam Harpaz and Simona Choi, who graduated on Friday evening. Simona actually was one of our original inaugural crew and was foundational in getting the peer counseling program started at Los Altos. It had already existed at Mountain View prior to that, and that was part of the work that she did in her first year. And we were lucky enough to have her continue with us this year. I just want to talk a little bit about the format of the presentation. We have a pretty quick initial set of slides, and then we really wanted to reserve some time at the end for all of you to be able to ask the students more questions and to dialogue with them directly and to take advantage of that. So we will start that shortly. Orly, are you going to run the slides? Okay, so I'm going to sit down. I'm going to put this mic back here. You don't, I don't think.
No, upload them tomorrow.
So you guys go ahead and take it away. Oh, actually, I think Mr. Volta has the first, he's going to talk a little bit about this is our full crew. We had 29 students this year, 23 students our first year, 29 this year, and we will have 36 next year. We've got over 60 applicants, and representing all of our student sites. And we're going to need a bigger room if we keep growing at this rate. We have been committed to trying to keep the experience as small and intimate as possible, so we really have an opportunity to engage with the superintendent in a meaningful way. But 36 is we're gonna be busting at the seams in here. So anyway, take it away.
At the beginning of the year, we heard from our students loud and clear, along with some community members. One of the biggest issues that they had as students was with alignment. Alignment in coursework, alignment in expectations, alignment in assignments that were meant to assess student knowledge, and also and the one big issue once we got down to it was alignment and grading. And we started discussions about the education code when it comes to final grades, our board policies and so on. And Ms. Bissonette and I were talking, and we said, wouldn't it be great to have student voice talking about recommendations from students on teacher grading? And then we anchored it with a book that's become pretty popular and misrepresented and misused in other districts, Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman. What was really fantastic about our students in our discussions was they took the philosophy behind this Grading for Equity, but they put an MVLA twist on it to make it realistic and not absurd. And that was something that I really liked in listening to their recommendations. And now we'll let them talk.
Sure. So I'd love to start us off on why we specifically focused on grading. So every class, whether we like it or not, and whether we like the class or not, we're obviously going to be graded on it, right? So grading has a lot of impact on our motivation to do work. If you are a teacher, you know that if the assignment is graded, it will completely change how much motivation the student has to complete that work. So that was our main focus this year. And we also talked about how confidence is really affected by grades, because obviously if you're getting lower grades than your peers, then you're going to have confidence issues. And this happened to me in the past. So we really wanted to talk about that. And then opportunity is also something we talked about. That's the last word on this slide. And we talked about that because sort of students who are getting more higher grades are getting more opportunities, especially with teachers. So we really wanted to talk about more equitable grading practices and what we can recommend to you to improve those practices.
So as Mr. Volta mentioned, we used the book Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman to sort of inform our decisions and recommendations in terms from the teacher's perspectives. And then we also used our personal experiences and discussions with each other to better inform from the student perspective what recommendations we'd like and changes we'd like to see moving forward.
Yeah, so just giving some overall summary of Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman. This was the book that we've based most of our solutions/suggestions about. The overall purpose of this book challenged kind of traditional grading practices that nowadays serve as hindrances towards student success. And in turn, this book proposes more equitable, accurate, and overall just more motivational systems to better serve all students equally, and especially those who have been historically underserved. So some of the core principles of equitable grading is accuracy. Grades should really reflect a student's academic proficiency, not solely behavior or compliance or timing. Examples of this can be late penalties or extra credit, which tend to reflect a student's, ability in that moment to take on an extra task or a lack of being able to take on an extra task. Additionally, bias resistance grading must minimize subjectivity and implicit bias. So this can look like using consistent criteria that is transparent to the students and very open while maintaining fair among across classes that share the similar grading rubrics among each criteria. Because we've tended to see across all of our classes that often the same courses can have different rubrics. Some are more fair and bias resistant, while others are not. And finally, motivational power. Grading should encourage a growth mindset and learning, not just giving that extrinsic motivation and reward of point chasing or punishing mistakes. So we really want to try to pursue this new ideology of grading in order to promote a much better system while tackling this issue.
So to add on a little more, the premise of this book is essentially that the 0 to 100 point scale is flawed because of how much if paper is failing over succeeding because of the 0 to 60 failing scale. And it's essentially saying that like it is too punishing to have a 0 to 100 scale because it is so hard to bounce back from that 0 or that missing assignment when compared to other scales such as like a 0 to 4 scale where it's not weighted as heavily.
And then go ahead. So something else we wanted to mention, and our slide may have disappeared, but it's important to mention that our advice operates under the current grading system. So referencing the 0 to 100 and the 0 to 4 grading scales in our recommendations that will come up on the next slides. So we are not suggesting a change in grading scales. We just wanted to mention.
Our first recommendation, I think we skipped the previous slide, but this is our recommendations. Our first recommendation was to establish a borderline a minimum line of 50% for all graded assignments. We believe this will help prevent like a single zero grade from disproportionately lowering the grade throughout the entire year. This won't apply to people who don't turn in their work. It will only apply if people turn in their own work with a genuine effort on time.
And then, as we've gathered our own experiences across all of our years here in the district, we've noticed that transparency is essential to student-empowered learning and decision-making. And a lot of the times, there tend to be a lot of extra variation across teachers with how this is being approached. Often, there are times, which Adam will explore, the technical aspect, where teachers tend to have a lack of transparency when grading. This can be waiting to release grades until months after an assignment has been completed, or disabling, which we'll explain, the edit mode on areas and grading systems. So overall, this just tends to cause a lot of distrust in the classroom, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. And we know it is in no way intentional, and all teachers have their own respective grading practices. However, it's important that we establish some sort of enforced system to ensure that all parties in the classroom are feeling respected and have a clear concept of what is going on grading wise.
I'd also love to add that especially in courses that have less overall assignments per year, that includes our courses and English courses and many elective courses, we have a lot of technical, small technical policies that make a huge difference in student life. Now, one of the main ones is up here on the slide, and it's the Aries what if mode, which essentially lets students change their grade temporarily on separate assignments to see how it affects their grade. And the teachers or system have a way of turning this on and off for different classes. And our recommendation is to allow all students to access this what if mode, edit mode on every single course. So students can understand the way their course and grading works better, because often there's a lot of categories and points that go into a grade, and students have a hard time understanding from seeing the numbers appear on their screen how the grade is being affected by which assignment. So this is our recommendation for this slide, is making sure that students have the ability to access the knowledge that is in Aries about the grade.
Oops, wait, go back. What was part of that? The updating of Aries, in order for that to be helpful?
Oh, yeah. Sure, yeah. I think this also is the case for many classes with less assignments, such as English and arts and elective, that when there's not a lot of assignments, sometimes teachers do not update the gradebook that often. But another recommendation that we have is to make sure that the gradebook will be updated every 3 weeks at the maximum. Now, this should really be at least once a week, but courses that have less assignments should be updated at least every 3 weeks.
And adding on to that, there are periods throughout the year, such as before finals, where the gradebook closes and students lose all access to view any grades at all. So it causes a lot of unnecessary stress when teachers fail to submit those grades prior to the book closing, because that basically causes students to go into big exams blindly without knowing where their current grade stands. And I know that across all grades at school, this is a big issue. So just ensuring that some sort of policy of when grades need to be updated and deadlines, which I know are hard to follow when there's so many students to grade, but especially just before those big cutoffs, they would benefit, I think, all students and teachers equally. Our next suggestion is to essentially put more emphasis on academic mastery over compliance. We had discussions of teachers having policies where they might drop the lowest test score, drop the lowest quiz score. In the book, it mentioned that because the grade uses averages, sometimes lower grades can disproportionately impact a student's grades, even though they show improvement over this course of the year. in a certain subject area. And so having policies or encouraging teachers and also, as we mentioned before, creating alignment within certain departments over what these policies are might support students in their academic mastery.
So the next recommendation we have is regarding alignment in retake or revision policies. We established over the course of this year that this is something that really impacts us as students. We want to emphasize the fact that retakes shouldn't just be to improve your grade, but rather to encourage persistence and growth, and growing that implicit or intrinsic motivation that Orly was referring to, rather than just trying to improve that end goal, that grade. We want to emphasize the fact that students learn at different rates, and retake policies and revision policies should reflect that and encourage that learning at different times and different rates. I personally had experiences with this in terms of course alignment. In the same course, some teachers offer retakes, others don't. There's different types of retakes in terms of a grade cap that you can get to with the retake. Some teachers only allow for an 80%, other teachers allow you to retake to 100%. And we know that our teachers don't have malicious intentions when it comes to these retake policies, but the alignment is definitely something that impacts us and impacts some students in different classes or courses disproportionately. So it's really important that we encourage the alignment with that.
And continuing on, kind of making the difference between revisions and retakes, making that differentiation more clear, as they do both promote learning and growth. But revisions in specific could look like things such as in my AP biology class, correct to learns, in which students are able to look at the questions that they got wrong on the most previous test and write a couple paragraphs about what they learned, the content, and really dive deep into what they realize they may have gone wrong with, they may have gone wrong with. And it also fosters collaboration as well. There are many students who will go into this class during tutorial and work together so that they can, learn these new, not rather new, but these topics so that they can better their understanding for the future. And it's also important to mention, as Chloe mentioned, it's not about the grade, it's really about creating more learning opportunities. And then retakes, on the other hand, offer more time to study and learn. So it encourages more out of class time questions to teachers, for example, really creating more student-teacher relationships. It encourages persistence among students, and it also, for example, with several world language classes, they allow for retakes, so that allows students to go in during tutorial again and take a look at, for example, things that they may have gotten wrong, so that they can go through and do better in the retakes. So just offering more opportunities like this that are consistent and aligned are very important. So moving forward, our next recommendation is implementing clear, consistent rubrics across courses. So this is really important as it reduces inconsistent expectations across different teachers for the same course. Different teachers may have different views on what a specific assignment's difficulty should be, what the different aspects it should include are. And this can cause a lot of stress for a lot of students, as I know a lot of students may talk to students who have different teachers for the same course and say, I have to do this for this assignment, but you have to do something very different, which could impact their grade in the long run as well. So that's creating that cycle of stress. And it also, by creating more consistent rubrics, it encourages growth mindset because it creates more concrete areas where students can improve. It makes it easier to self-assess, to help a student self-assess when they are completing assignments. And then finally, it also gives stronger confidence among both students and families over the objectivity of their grades.
Now our final suggestion: reduce bias in grading by eliminating non-academic factors. We believe that grades should not be reflective of a person's soft skills. And what I mean by that is like punctuality, homework, or like just in general, like participation in class. We think that those should be tracked somewhere separately and not in the actual academic grade. That way it gives the student the best chance of their grade accurately representing themselves. An example of this that I have is that my friend gives me a ride to school every day. So my sophomore year, I ended up being late one class period. And that was the day and that packet was due. That packet was worth probably around 7% of my grade. And because I was late that day, I missed the period where he like it accepts it, right? So he didn't like mention it to me later in the period. And then when I find out that I missed that period, I go back to him the following week and he tells me that because I missed that period because I was late, he wouldn't take it. And I ended up getting a letter grade down in that process from an A to a B.
Thank you for your consideration. Any questions?
Thank you all for all your work and recommendations and preparation and for spending your first day of summer with us. I think the board does have some comments and questions, so we can start. Dean, do you want to start at that part or we'll come back this way?
Thank you. So this is the first time we're seeing this, so I'm feeling not very much prepared, right, to ask the questions. However, have you guys done any quantitative analysis for the solutions that you are proposing? For example, do you have the data that shows the distribution of grades between various teachers? Do you have the data that shows how students in different classes perform on AP tests or on SPAC, something that's standardized, where you can say that in a classroom where the teacher is a little more lax with grading, students perform this way. And in a classroom where the teacher is, has higher expectations or makes the class more difficult, the kids are performing in a different way. Any of such analysis?
So we do not have any quantitative data, but we do, we have had a lot of common consensus, and there is a big student community that is formed, just a lot of word of mouth among students in which they talk about these topics as it is very relevant to our student culture here. There are certain courses that often have more of these comments than others because they are more aligned than others. So yes, we do not have quantitative data, but we do have a lot of qualitative data.
I would also like to mention that we referenced in our discussions and studying the book by Joe Beltran, thank you. And there were some studies, I believe, mentioned in some parts of the book. I can't name one off the top of my head, but there were a few that we kind of discussed and agreed with the resulting suggestion from those studies.
Have you guys studied any information opposing that book? There's a lot of controversy about this book.
I can answer that. I think the book does do itself very well in serving an opposing view to many of what's mentioned. But in our room, we have had discussions where a lot of us have opposed different ideas that we mentioned and the book mentioned. So we have heard the popular pushback to many of the ideas of the book, and the recommendations that we have given you are what we have decided is, as consensus, is a great suggestion for this district.
So I actually talked to a few students, and I have one example that I'm prepared to offer, because like I said, I didn't see the presentation. I've heard that in some cases, students have a very hard teacher, and they have to work throughout the whole year very hard. But the AP exam that they take was easy. And once they took the exam, they realized how well prepared they were. In other cases, students had to cram for several weeks before the AP test because they were not ready for it, because the teacher wasn't as demanding and wasn't supportive of their learning throughout the year. Which one of those options would you prefer? Because both exist, right? That's just the reality. Both exist, and you can argue that I think one or the other isn't necessarily, one isn't bad or the other isn't bad, but there are consequences to both.
We 100% hear you, but we're not necessarily comparing the caliber of the rigor of the classes that teachers are offering, but moreover, just the lack of alignment throughout these, whether it being extra assignments that don't necessarily give them an academic advantage or preparatory lesson for their AP test. This is also the case among normal level classes, non-APs or honors. So while yes, having a more rigorous teacher who I guess is more tailored to the prep needed for an AP test can benefit a student. We're not solely just looking at, you know, how is that benefiting the APs and honors, but also all around all courses, and not necessarily just, you know, the level of rigor, but the actual, you know, I've had a teacher slap a rubric on my desk that was in faint font on the top. It said a different class. That was being given to mine. That was a lower level class given to a higher level class. Like I was in an AP class and I was given a rubric that said it was for the normal level and vice versa. I've heard stories of that. So it's more just about making sure that the grading practices used, whether it's policies or rubrics or even just, you know, retake policies, that they're all being consolidated and talked amongst all the teachers to make sure that they are, you know, aligned throughout the different courses, because it's more about just making sure that teachers are having that open communication to ensure that, you know, one teacher can be a lot rougher and the other can be a lot more lenient, but as long as they are having the same overall discussion about how to approach grading and rubrics and things like that, that it is aligned for students and for teachers for less confusion and stress.
I agree with Orly. I just wanted to add on one more thing. We've also discussed multiple times how it's undoubtedly true that the majority of the students in our district are very motivated, very hardworking, and they care about their grades. And in that, there are a lot of practices by teachers that we may actually benefit from, that we are opposing in these recommendations because of that desire for alignment among teachers and among courses. So we've definitely discussed different perspectives and wanting to increase that alignment and making it fair for all students, regardless of what course or what teacher they are.
Catherine, while you're working on that, can I just add for context that there is currently board policy and administrative regulation, it's 5121, that talks about alignment of assessments for the district and has an expectation that's been around for decades that teachers of like courses have aligned practices around assessments. And I think that's partly where the students are coming from with this set of recommendations, is that they would like to ensure that the board policy that currently exists is we're being mindful of that practice and that policy. So that didn't get mentioned yet.
I would agree with Michelle that we do have some of these policies, but maybe it's the AR, the administrative regulations, or a handbook at the school, or discussion in course teams, or whatever that needs to be, you know, drilled down to a more specific level so that everybody's on the same page. If they're assuming they're willing to be. But I would say with things like retakes and revisions, I think it's the best approach too. However, how much time does it take a teacher to allow, to what extent, revisions and retakes for everything that a student does of 120 students all the time? So, and how do you feel that that can be mitigated, or more staff development time, or more what, where they could have the time to grade or evaluate all those extra versions of everything? It's one question. Let me give you all of them at once. Second of all, do you think you guys that are seniors, was it already a block schedule when you started? Yeah. At least 2 days a block, but the 4 days a block, was it already the 4 days a block? How do you feel that the way the classes are arranged in terms of the long periods of time in a class affect or don't affect the grades or affect how many assignments you get or not? Or maybe you don't know because you've always done it this way. It's another question. And then the other one is for things like being on time or how many of these different things, does there need to be like a range, like being late once should not really ding you forever. But if you're late occasionally and you do have a really good reason, et cetera, what's the range? 5 minutes late, half an hour late, you know, what are the guidelines at each end of the equation for something like being on time, but also other things, because we can't just have kind of a stroll in and stroll out kind of environment either in the classroom. So, you know, where do we set the different limits, or do you have some recommendations on that?
I think I can answer the last one about being on time. I think we're more focusing on like the grading aspect of being on time.
Okay.
Like if you're 30 minutes late, you should somewhat be penalized in some way, but not through your grades, because grades are for mostly education, we feel. And we have a lot of students. There was like a strike a while back, and there was a lot of students who had issues like getting to school on time, and we don't want things such as those for students who may have harder times getting to school, such as what Marvin talked about. We don't want those to impact their grades unjustly.
And then the other questions.
Sure. So, the vast majority of teachers I've had throughout my time at Mountain View have always had more than one version of a test, whether to, you know, differentiate the rows to avoid cheating or to serve as a retake for those who choose following the original exam that they're given. I do also know that a lot of the world language teachers they pull from, you know, preparatory for the eventual AP test if it's an AP class, or if it's just a regular honors, they'll kind of, you know, take the original exam and just modify it to be sort like same overall groundwork, but new questions. So I know that a lot of teachers have some sort of like, well, some don't have any, but the ones who do offer revision or retake policies will always have some sort of new version or, you know, the correction process in AP Bio where you get all the questions you've missed and you write basically short paragraphs about why it was wrong, what's the new answer, etc. So in terms of like time commitment for teachers, I don't think it would take an excessive extra amount of time for them, as many already have these extra versions and, you know, ways to deal with it. We're more just talking about making sure that those are uniformly offered in all courses, and that, you know, if some classes let you retake to only 75%, how come a different teacher will let you retake to an 100%, things like that.
Also adding on, also adding on to what Orly was mentioning is that often a lot of teachers may use multiple choice tests in which they can use Scantrons that allow them to pretty efficiently grade tests by just putting the Scantron up to the camera. So using more efficient means like that can also help make the revision process grading aspect a little quicker for the teachers.
And then did you have any comment on how the block schedules are working in, and if they have any effect on grading or not?
Yeah, so I'm a senior, and I think what I'm understanding from your question is you're asking us what we think about the day-by-day grading the ABC bell schedule system. You're right that I have had these all 4 years, so it's sort of what I'm used to, but I do think it's an effective use of time. And Simona is also a senior and they can talk about what you feel, but I feel that it's an effective use of time because the block periods are when we really get time done. And then the Monday periods, the A periods are sort of when we check in about what we've done over the weekend or the week past.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. I would also like to mention that the block periods give us more time for maybe more heavily weighted assignments, but also more time with our teachers to kind of check in with them and make sure that we're on the right track. For example, for some of our STEM courses like labs or like in chemistry or physics, or time to write essays for some English courses, or maybe like longer tests, especially leading up to AP testing. It's really helpful to have longer periods of time to work with our teachers for work time or to be assessed.
Thank you. All right. Well, first of all, I'll tell you that I'm very impressed with you guys. Clearly, you've put a lot of thought, thinking in discussion and collaboration into this. So thank you for doing this. And of course, being here after school is done for the year, especially for the graduates. I'll agree with the team that whenever possible, mixing quantitative data with qualitative is what produces the best results. And I realize the data that we mentioned is probably hard to get, but if you had that, you probably would have had much stronger rationale for recommendations you have, or maybe other ones. The other piece that I think did not come out, but I'm hearing you guys talk about it in answering other questions, is consideration of alternatives. Whatever recommendation you make, right? There are other things you actually considered, discussed, decided not to do, right? And it's really important to understand what were those other alternatives and what actually caused you to recommend this particular action as opposed to another, as well as explain what is the cost, right? So Catherine asked a lot of questions, so like, well, what is the implications for the teachers, right? So everything you guys are suggesting has a cost. It can be the time of the teacher, the attention of the teacher, it can be your time, administration time. And so I'm curious to better understand sort of what are the costs of these. Now, since you guys made many recommendations, maybe I'll just ask these questions for the most important ones. What are your top 2 most important recommendations? I'm not sure if the presentation was in order or not. And for those, what alternative solutions did you consider? Why did you choose this particular one versus the alternatives? And what is the cost? What are the implications of implementing this recommendation?
Well, they're looking for this opportunity. I will say that the quantitative part, that is on the district. We did not share teacher grades, nor did we want the students to compare grades. Those are things that even experienced teacher teams get nervous about. So that was on the district, not on the students.
Understood. Understood. That one is a little bit challenging. Yes, I would agree. So. Yeah.
Okay. I'd love to start. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So one of the slides mentioned a minimum grade of 50%, and I'd love to tell you about the alternatives that we had to this recommendation. So one of the alternatives we talked about was trying there's different sections of different courses, for example, homework sections or reading sections. We wanted to apply, we thought about considered applying instead of a mean or average, a mode or median, which is a different way to look at the numbers. Essentially, for example, we pick out the most frequent of the numbers and leave that as a grade for mode. And we considered this, but we decided that that disregards completely some assignments, and we didn't think that was fair. So we decided to not touch with recommendations the way we calculate the points in the grade book, but rather just allow the 50% minimum, which disproportionately brings a student grade down because of the 0 to 60%, which is fail.
What are the cons of this particular approach that you suggested?
So the issues with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the issues with the different ways to calculate the grades, I think that's what you're asking?
I'm asking for the recommendations that you made. Like, what are the counter arguments for that?
Yeah. So this one actually was one of our more controversial ones in the forum, because we do think that students who completely skip on an assignment should not receive a 50%, because that's what was argued, because that would allow students to sort of skip out on some assignments. But we at the end we decided that it was the positive reinforcement was better than the negative reinforcement, and that's a personal thing that I believe throughout, not just in school, that the positive reinforcement of getting a high grade is stronger than not wanting to get that 0.
Okay.
Right, so for me, I think the most important one was the transparency and having those grades updated at maximum every 3 weeks. Because I just think it's important for there to be a vision that the student has of their own grades and where they should prioritize their time, because time is so limited as a student. And to answer your question about cons, I think the biggest con here is for a teacher, they may have to put in more time in grading because of that 3 week maximum. But other than that, I think that the pros heavily outweigh the cons in this specific scenario.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, some of the feedback I've heard from parents is that some teachers do not grade and publish their grades frequently enough, which then in turn doesn't provide the right visibility and transparency to the student nor to the parent who was complaining to me. So yeah. Okay, my last question is, what do you guys think is the low-hanging fruit recommendations, things that have minimal cost, easy to adopt? What would you suggest that the district looks into first and considers?
I would say that the transparency is pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, it's, I feel as though it's kind of a way to maintain a positive relationship with your teacher is to have that transparency and clear communication. Especially, 3 weeks is a pretty long time, especially for a hefty essay. So I just feel as though it should be pretty ubiquitously implemented. I mean, a lot of teachers do it, and to their credit, it's very nice to have a teacher who will, pretty frequently update your grades. You'll know what's going on. But there are those teachers who I mean, they can be a great teacher, but if you don't know exactly where you stand in the class, it causes a lot of uncertainty. And especially going into, big testing sessions like finals week and just not knowing what's going on. I think that this is very easily avoidable, and by implementing this, I think a lot of students would, feel a lot more confident going into class, just knowing where they stand.
Yeah, completely makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I actually agree with much of what Alex said, so I'll just add some of my comments. I'm very impressed. I've actually heard a lot of what you said, but it was very well organized, and very clearly articulated its benefits to students. I think what is harder for you as students and where the administration comes in, and I think to Alex's point, is the cost to teachers. And as a trustee, I can tell the superintendent, go do whatever. But when it comes to teachers, we have to negotiate with them in their contract. So I guess partly my question is for the superintendent, how many of these change, like if we were to say we agree with the students, how many of these changes could we implement realistically given our current contract with the teachers? Some of these seem to me really realistic to me, like, grading everything every 3 weeks, but a teacher could say, well, I don't know, I give a 20-page paper. I don't know if that's the case. So then I have to do it for 120 kids. I don't know if I think that would be college level, but who knows in the school. So it would depend, I suppose. And then I also think, talking about the, someone else mentioned the 50% for turning in an assignment. I agree with that in principle, and I also think there needs to be some bounds on that. For example, if you waited until finals week and turned in 6 assignments, that's really not fair. And there are a number of students that did that. That's not really fair to the teacher. So I think there should be some bounds. I don't know what those should be. I'm not a teacher, but I think just a blanket, you can just turn in an assignment and get 50% is not really fair to those who actually, unless there are exceptional circumstances. I think, like there's you can't go to school or something like that. So I guess that's my question for the superintendent is, since you were leading this task force, how many of these things could we actually start implementing if we, as a board, agreed with them?
In terms of the assignment of the grade, the final grade in our board policy, outstanding, above average, average, below average, and failure. We have the ed code to wrestle with. We're not going to be able to touch that in terms so long as the teacher can show how they reached those grades. We talked about that ed code in MSAC. As far as the transparency part in terms of how often, I know of some districts that have had some success with negotiating how often teachers actually had to upgrade, update their electronic grade books. We're now well into the 21st century. Every school district is using an electronic grade book. Students, parents, everyone are looking at. So I've seen some districts where that is something that we could potentially look at. As far as the rubrics and the calibration with teachers that the students talked about, we are looking into we're looking into those priorities that people currently have with our current belt schedule and those things that people could do without. We're looking to add some collaboration time for our teachers. This visit I talked about that administrative regulation that is pretty old. However, since that regulation was passed, we changed our belt schedule, and the collaboration time is not as well defined as it once was with collaboration days. So those are the three prongs that we will be looking at to try to get some of these things done. Also, I'm going to share these recommendations with the teachers on our kickoff day. I think their work should not end here. We should talk about it. Perhaps maybe even get Adam to come back in July for the kickoff day, or August too, if he's willing to come out, or even Simona, the two seniors, goes back. We'll make you guys that actually have teachers in the room speak. But this is something I think it's important. You know, we talk about mental health and we talk about anxiety and student anxiety, and these are all things too that led to that, that they were talking about. And so I think it's worth repeating again down the road so that teachers can understand that this is an everyday common issue that students are talking about it, and the best and the brightest of the district, and using what Feldman said and applying it to our district and what they believe is the right thing to do. So that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard, I think this will need to be an iterative process. I've heard this obviously raised a number of times in a number of different ways. This is the most organized, and obviously it's coming from the superintendent level. So I hope we can get some traction. And I hope we can negotiate with our teachers, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to have to agree to do all of these things. And some of them are obviously doing it anyway, which is wonderful, and some of them are not. And also we need to find out from those teachers, which I don't know, is why they're not doing these things now. Is it they just don't think they need to be done? Is it that it's extra work? Is it that they don't understand its impact on students? I think those conversations need to be had. And that is actually below my level, but I think are important things for you to understand as students. That I hear what you're saying, and I realize that I can't just go and tell the teachers do this. I want to be realistic with you as a trustee, what my purview is, and that's squarely over the admin staff to negotiate with the teachers. But I cannot, we have a contract with the teachers that outlines what we can and can't do. And I think we do have a policy, but it's not specific enough to how you describe things. I think it could get there. And I think a lot of teachers do understand the mental health challenges, and also that you mentioned equity. I think equity, I I actually think equity applies to all students. Those students who perform at the highest level face stress equal in different ways than students who are taking the lowest classes and are affected by things like the VTA strike. It affects students throughout our schools, and I'm concerned about our student stress. And I certainly heard loudly and clearly that our current grading practices contribute to your stress, and I hear that very seriously. So while I am saying to you, I'm not sure what action specifically we as board can take tonight. I do want to tell you how seriously I hear what you're saying and the emotion behind what you're saying. And thank you also for having the courage to sit up here and spend your summer talking to us about this.
Thank you, Zita. I think most of the questions I had were already asked. I do have one, maybe final one, because I think it was helpful to hear some possible next steps. And if we focus on everything, we are not really focused on anything. And so I'm curious, and it's fine if it's more anecdotal and qualitative, but is there any specific subjects or courses where you have experienced the most, the challenges you spoke to, that maybe we should consider prioritizing in terms of some of these recommendations? And it doesn't have to be specific to you, but what you've heard also from peers.
I would say it varies, but in my personal experience, I've had a lot of interesting experiences in my history courses. You know, one teacher can be doing something completely different. And then I've also had in my math courses last year, I had a teacher who unfortunately decided to completely stray from the rest of the curriculum that all three other teachers in that discipline were doing. So I would say math and history for me, but
I would agree with math as well. We often take a lot of very long tests, and sometimes different teachers will give us different amounts of time to do those tests, even though it will be the same test. For example, you have to do 30 questions, and in one class you'll have 60 minutes, and another class you'll have 90 minutes. And often there may be verbs that may differ for different teachers, so just keeping an eye on that as well.
I'd love to agree with math as well, especially for transparency and for the retake policies and the minimum 50%. Those three recommendations really pertain to math, especially since we have both assignments that are entered almost every single day because it's homework and assignments that are updated really once in a while, such as like TED. Yeah, so I think most of these recommendations pertain to math.
Yeah, that was interesting. That wasn't going to be my guess.
Yeah.
it definitely varies because last year I had quite a negative experience, but this year I've had a very positive. So again, we're just talking about that unwanted variance and how we're just overall trying to preach for more alignment overall.
So, Irani, I just wanted to point out that that's very odd that the same test would have the different amounts of minutes. That is, I mean, they're math teachers. That is very odd. So thank you for pointing that out. That is clearly inequitable. There's no question about that. So thank you.
May I add one thing to that? The one that intrigued me also one of the most is the what if part in areas which I didn't even know it existed, and also the cutting off the grade books so you couldn't really see what you've done just before finals. I don't know why we do that.
Well, the grade book shuts off completely. Like the first day of finals and then through to when, like, since the winter finals is it ends before winter break. Usually you get your grades towards the end of winter break back. And then for summer finals, it's usually, like a week or two into summer. I've heard from my teachers because I have asked how come the grade book completely goes dark. It's used as sometimes a measure to try to prevent a lot of stress from students, incessantly checking their grades throughout this period of time. And in turn going to teachers asking, why'd you give me this? Why'd you give me that? Blah, blah, blah. So I think its original intent was to prevent and limit stress. However, I know that it depends on the student, but it can cause a lot more, especially when your teacher hasn't updated the grade book. But I think that was the original intent I've gathered from my teachers, so.
So you're saying it goes dark, not counting whether the final scores have been posted or not?
No, so like the day before final starts, basically, it just goes black.
Well, but you don't have all the scores from before the final
Exactly.
yet.
That's
I
the
see.
issue.
That is the issue.
That's
Okay.
the issue.
Not the dark part,
Yeah,
but
not the dark
you don't
necessarily,
know
but-
the
yeah.
other grades up to there if you
Yes.
didn't copy them off real quick before they did that.
Yeah,
Okay.
you go in blindly.
And if they hadn't posted them.
Yeah,
Okay.
especially if they hadn't posted them, because I know like a lot of students often, before finals, or let's say even weeks back, they'll be absent for one quiz. Let's say they make up the quiz, but the teacher still hasn't entered that. They go into the finals with a grade level way lower than what it actually would be had the teacher entered that. So, yeah.
And by no means are we saying that the dark period is bad. I honestly believe it's a good thing because I do think a lot of students don't worry as much, at least personally, don't worry about their grades as much during those breaks in which the grades are not available. It's really, again, echoing the before part, not knowing prior.
Okay, then the other thing you guys mentioned in your responses to us was the curve. The, whatever, the curve. And so how does that fit into all of this, by the way?
The curve rather than revision.
No, curving the grade.
Honestly, I can't think of a teacher who curves my grades senior year. It used to be something that they used to do in freshman year. And I personally don't like it, but it does help teachers cut down on some of that work that would go into revision, like you were saying. Did that answer your question?
I can.
Yeah.
Sort of, I mean, how do you feel about first? Is it fair or not fair, or?
This is a very debatable topic. I know that across the majority of our advanced physics classes at Mountain View, we have pretty intense curves because the averages tend to be a bit lower in such a rigorous course. And I know that benefits that group of students a lot. My math teacher takes a slightly different approach than just a normal averaged curve where they do a scale, which is basically they'll take everyone's original score and add on a few points. Regardless of what they got, not necessarily using their percentage, but like, oh, let's just give everyone equally like 2 additional points to try to bring that whole class average up. I think that can be very helpful. Whereas curves, it depends what side of the curve you're on. If you're, on the lower end, or if you're on the higher end, and then the curve is trying to, bring the mean more closely together to like, it can negatively impact those higher scoring students. So it's there's a lot of different ways to approach it. I know that some teachers do the scales and some people do just statistical curves.
I just had one more question, was the what if? You mentioned that actually what was the benefit of turning it off? Do you know?
There's some teachers who turn it off right as they're grading something because they don't want students to come to them. I believe, I'm not a teacher, but I believe teachers are turning them off because they don't want students to come as they are in the grading process to try to help change the grade. They would like to see the grades, the students to see the grades after the grading process is complete and then come talk to them. I don't like this approach, and I think we've talked about that approach being a little more harmful. But there are courses that have this what if mode closed for an assignment for the entire year, a section for the entire year, or even the entire course for the entire year, which is really not great.
Additionally, I know that some teachers view it as a negative tool because they feel that students will calculate, oh, what's the lowest I need on this assignment in order to keep my A? So like, can I do the bare minimum? However, across many students, as we know, this is a very rigorous district. That's not usually the case. So that tends to create, more of a feeling of distrust in the classroom. So I think there's kind of a stigma around this tool that it could be used for the worse when intern students really just want to calculate where exactly they would stand. Let's say they got this because they felt this good about an assignment, and it's more just used as a prediction and a way to manage your current course load and assignments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, students.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
For all
time.
your responses.
Great job. Thank you. Both. I only hear half of what you're saying because of the noise, so I'm making up the rest. Yeah, that's to support you, yeah.
Alrighty, move on. Public hearings. So I'm opening these, right? So we're gonna open up the public hearing for disclosure of collective bargaining agreement with the District Teachers Association and the district. And then do we have anyone? Gonna speak? They close it. All right, we're closing that one. And then we'll open up the LCAP update and first reading public hearing.
Good evening. Well, that is a tough act to follow, I will tell you. But it is an honor to be here this evening, trustees, and present to you our Mountain View Los Altos Local Control and Accountability Plan, our annual report. Thank you. So first off, the LCAP, as it's called often, is a 3-year strategic plan required by the state. It has a structured format that incorporates certain aspects of the vision and the priorities of our state. One of them is the overall format of how and what goes into an LCAP. It is structured somewhat like SMART goals, where you have a broad goal, and then that broad goal is broken down by what are the specific actions that you would take to accomplish that goal, with the specific measurements and monitoring that supports the accountability and knowing if you accomplish the goal or the actions or to what degree you're getting close. And then it also incorporates related expenditures, making sure that you're able to fiscally support that goal, and that goal is relevant, or and those actions and goals are relevant to what the district is working towards. In addition to that, there are, I'm sorry, I just noticed a small typo there with how the formatting. In regards to that, there's also the focus on what is called unduplicated students. These are students who are low income English language learners, foster homeless youth that often come to a school system with many challenges and exceptional needs. In addition, I added to this our students with disabilities, as we often want to also ensure that we're focusing on our students with IEPs. And lastly, the LCAP requires that we incorporate the state priorities, and I'll talk about those state priorities in just a moment. One of the reasons why we're required to do the LCAP is because we do receive state funding called the Local Control Funding Formula. Back in 2013, this was enacted by the state as a means of trying to simplify their funding formula for the states, in that the funding is ensuring that it is being used equitably. If you receive this funding, then you need to submit an LCAP. The helpful part about the LCSF is that second bullet down is it does allow for local control of the districts determining how they want to best use those funding allocations. And then as the flip side, it requires us to ensure that we're continually monitoring, reflecting on our metrics, improving on our work, and that goes as part of what the LCAP submission process is. So an overall snapshot of our district, I did mention that we are required throughout the LCAP to be focusing on our unduplicated students and setting aside a certain percentage of our LCSF, our local control funding formula, for those unduplicated students. On the district snapshot slide, it does show us what our population of our unduplicated students are. In our district, they are a very small population. So oftentimes when we're looking at broad data, such a small population can have minimal impact on a data set that is 4,400 students. And so it looks as if the district is doing strong with all populations in academics. And that's why these deep dives into our data, disaggregating the data, and this LCAP focusing on unduplicated students is so important. I mentioned in a previous slide that we're required to incorporate the state priorities. These are the 11 indicators that the state deems extremely important for school districts to report on, and they set up, I'm going to go to the next page because it's a complementary slide. They set up what they call a dashboard, a California dashboard, and this is more or less like a school report card. How is that district doing against the state's 11 priorities? For MVLA, we are very proud. 10 out of 11 of the state priorities, we are far exceeding with greens and blues. When we do, like I mentioned earlier, a deeper dive into some of these greens and blues, what we do see is those unduplicated student population that I referred to earlier, English language learners, homeless foster youth. We see that they are not doing as strong as their counterparts. And that is one of the reasons why this LCAP is important, but also the work of our district in equity. Part of, again, the, would you mind holding to afterwards? Thank you so much. Part of the requirement of the LCAP is ensuring budget expenditures for the goals and the various actions. I know that Elvis and his business services team works very closely with my ed services team throughout the year with our expenditures for the LCAP, and that he'll be giving a comprehensive overview of the budget. So I'll minimize that piece for the LCAP conversation. Before we dive into the two different goals, I just wanted to highlight overall some quick celebrations. What we're seeing is strong academics, math and English, GPAs, positive climate and engagement with our parent partnership meetings, our California Healthy Kids surveys showing increase of climate and connectedness from our students, and our student support and discipline data also starting to improve and show strong climate with our discipline and attendance. We are seeing persistent challenges within the two goals, and those persistent challenges continue to be with our English language learners and our foster youth. So that's a big focus for us. So as we move forward into our two goals, part of the requirement, and it's an honor to do this, is to get community input. Meeting with various organizations such as our District English Learner Advisory Committee, our Family Partnership Committee, our Special Education SELPA Director, going into classes and getting input from students has been a part of determining how we're doing on our current LCAP, and what are we needing to focus on as we move into the future year. So here's where we are, and again, I apologize for the formatting. Something must have happened between just the different widths of the screen. For goal number 1, create and sustain inclusive, culturally responsive classrooms that ensure equitable access to high quality instruction and foster a sense of belonging for all students. That broad goal, we broke it down into 6 action items. For 6 action items, we did the monitoring and the budget expenditures as well. Tier 1 instructional practices, this is more or less our professional learning and training for our teachers. We have seen moving into this year that we're having daily lessons that are consistently aligned with that Tier 1 instruction that elevates all students' access, but the The professional learning and the learning strategies are really targeted for language learners to have access and language acquisition into the curriculum. For course team collaboration, we heard from our student panel that this is ongoing work that we need to focus and prioritize on. We support course team collaboration by retreat meetings, after school paid time where teachers are able to come together, collaborate, align grading, align assessment, align instructions. One of the challenges that we're seeing with 1.3 is, as Mr. Volta said, our Bell schedule, and that currently built in, there's 20 minutes of collaboration time for a course team, and to do significant alignment and collaboration within 20 minutes a week is extremely difficult, and so that's an area of focus of ours. Other items are co-teaching, strengthening our ELD program, and working to support parent and student engagement and communication from the classroom level. Some bright spots that we've seen, academics continue to improve. We have green and blues in math and ELA. Our English language learners have improved in their dashboard for math. We're seeing GPA and no F rates increasing. Teacher capacity is interest in collaborating, but again, you know, the challenge with the Bell schedule as noted. And next slide, what are we seeing with our areas of focus? Despite all of this, we are still seeing that our English language learners and our students with disabilities are scoring below their peers on state tests like the SBAC. We're seeing that our resources for co-teaching and collaboration is extremely helpful and strong, but we're also hearing from these groups that they need ongoing professional learning and time to do the co-teaching partnership that's required. And lastly, the college readiness gaps. We're seeing low enrollment in AP honor classes compared to their counterparts for our EL students. So what does this mean moving forward? This means that we're going to continue to support our ELD program with heightened focus, working with our counseling teams. This is our priority for next year. Particularly, you heard from them earlier with Tier 2 instruction. I put in accelerated ELD. What I was referring to with that is that we're continuing, we're working with our ELD team or program with project-based learning, ongoing professional learning. In our mainstream classes, we are piloting a cohorting with English and math with levels, with the various levels, so that they're with other ELD peers that have shown to be successful with creating a place of belonging, but also targeted support from the teacher. As we move on to goal 2, we also have real strong success in the actions that we implemented. Goal 2 is focused on the systems that supports academics. Those systems are outside of the classroom, items like college and career and academic counseling. Due to our ongoing work with college and academic counseling and the targeted outreach that they are doing, we have seen a decrease in dropout rates. As an example, expenditures was supporting professional learning. We've been working with our Foothill Community College to do direct enrollment. Direct enrollment is our community college advisors coming to our campus and meeting with students and helping them enroll directly into Foothill. So starting the following year that they graduate, they're already registered, they already have a badge and an ID. All they need to do is sign up for classes. One of the biggest barriers that have been shown in community colleges for students is the enrollment process into that community. It's a multi-step, multi-approval process, and it could be confusing enough to where some students end up not going to community college and pursuing other endeavors just because of that barrier that we're removing. A couple other elements with the multi-tiers are mental health and wellness, very strong programs that have been developing over the last few years under the leadership of William Blair, as well as the APs and the strong clinicians within that program, those programs. We have seen an increase of our California Healthy Kids Survey results showing that school connectedness, adults on campus that they're relating to, as well as feeling more regulated is improving on our results. And like I mentioned earlier, we continue to also support ELD, strengthening curriculum, approving their courses to get A to G approved in English. We hired an ELD TOSA teacher on special assignment that is specifically focusing just for our language learners with both the ELD program as well as our core content teachers supporting ELD students in their classrooms. We have seen reclassification rate double this year, which we're very proud of. And again, special education continues to be a focus with co-teaching, as well as working with compliance and professional learning for both our IAs and our educators that have been built into the system this year. With all of this, we have seen some great key outcomes from meeting the dashboard indicators, which again is a result of comprehensive work. CTE enrollment has increased 32% over the last year. Wellness, as mentioned, is also improving with the safety and motivation indicators. Remaining challenges, the persistence that we're seeing with some of our unduplicated students being below their peers is our continued work. Working to build in stronger tier 2 interventions to support this, and consistent implementation with our programs across our sites. So with that, the remaining steps is one, to take any questions that you have for tonight. And I know this was a quick overview, but it was a touch point on the document that was shared online. This LCAP document is also on our website, at which we're inviting public comment to give us any additional feedback on the LCAP plan, and that I will be bringing the plan back to you on June 9th for approval, and we'll move forward with implementation from there. So thank you.
Yes, maybe you want to go in order again or something?
Yeah, no. I think Vivian, you had a question earlier.
Yeah, thank you. So as I was looking at the dashboard, I was going to ask, how much value do we give to this dashboard if you don't show it with respect to different cohorts of students? Like I said, the LCAP requires that we focus on non-duplicated students, yet it still also provides, it's supposed to provide valuable outcome for all students.
Correct.
So as we, looking at an overall dashboard doesn't seem to be meaningful. We need to look at the dashboard specific to different student populations, right, to see the outcome.
So I appreciate you saying that. And when you look into the LCAP plan itself, you will notice that the dashboard is not a broad stroke like I did a one slide overview here, but depending on the metric, we have done a deep dive into the dashboard and pulled out the unduplicated numbers to show whether we're talking attendance or CCI, college career indicator readiness, or our SBAC overview. We are desegregating the dashboard data.
Where is it? It's in the presentation?
No, it's in the LCAP plan itself. The presentation slides was just 13 slides. That was a quick, a brief overview of the details that go far more specific into the plan itself.
I've also got another question. So I have concerns about how, for example, constructing meaning is impacting different cohorts of students. I suspect that it might be very helpful to some and not supportive for others, because it takes time, it takes a lot more effort. And how do we demonstrate causal impact of efforts like this? constructive meaning, co-teaching. And we can relate the impact from these efforts towards the outcome. An example, you actually gave a good example that made me think about this. When we empower students to register for a college, right? I think it's a 2-year college, you said. That facilitates the setup, students are more prepared, right? The excellent activity. But it has nothing to do with academic progress, right? So you can look at the results and the outcome and say, look, most students are going into college, which means they must be more prepared for college. In reality, no. You just facilitated their process of applying for college, getting all their documents ready. Yeah, it's all the right thing to do. Just can't draw a conclusion out of that, right? Unless you have the actual causal effect. So how do we tell?
Well, one item, I've been working with AP teachers who are implementing with fidelity constructing meaning. And they have noted strong achievement of all students across the board and an increase of AP exams. Constructing meaning does not harm one student while helping another. It raises all students up. It provides opportunities for structured academic discourse. I have been in an honors class where a teacher was trying out constructing meaning and allowed the structured academic discourse to be an option. And I observed 2 students that answered the prompt of what the teacher was asking them to talk about. And within 15 seconds, they answered the prompt and they were done. And so then I went over to the 2 students, and they didn't use the structured. And then I went over to the 2 students and I said, hey, I'm here, I'm just learning, and I want to really see what this looks like. Would you mind doing that again and following the option of the structured? I saw them struggle with thinking through the content and how to articulate the content and then build off of one another's content using the bricks and mortars, as we call them. And that was an honors class. And so not only is constructing meaning going to help our language learners get access through structured and understanding different ways of compare and contrast, disposition and proposal, but we have evidence that it is also supporting our students in our honors and AP classes. I appreciate that question.
This evidence quantitative? It's nice to hear the opinion, but is there evidence?
Yeah, I have been working with an AP teacher who has been tracking the evidence. We're just completing right now our constructing meaning training, right? And so when we look at high stakes state test scores, we're not going to see that information yet. It'll take time to build to that, particularly because that's only our juniors that are being tested on that. Where we are taking a look in addition is our DNF rate, is when we're going into classes and we're looking at engagement rate. When we look at our California Healthy Kids Survey and our students are reporting that they're feeling connected and seen by their peers, these are all forms of data that we are monitoring to ensure that this work of constructing meaning, that takes time from our teachers. We want to respect and appreciate the work, but also make sure that if they're going to put this time in, it's going to have an impact. And so those are some of the data points that we'll be monitoring. And we'll be happy to be reporting out with transparency as we continue to build this.
It's very difficult to quantitatively see which effort is improving which data set by what percent. Especially when we look at these data sets, the dashboard, this is one of the frustrating things is we're going to get our SBAC results. So probably sometime in the summer.
We have them.
We have them now.
We just have to upload and start disaggregating.
And so we have them now a little bit, so we can start looking at them as compared to before. But even then, it's hard to compare because we have different percentages of students that have taken the tests in the past. And then how much of that is our constructing meaning? How much of that is changes that the principals have made in the master schedule or changes in instruct? I mean, there are so many different outliers to every one of these data sets. The one answer to your question, though, as we move forward and give time for collaboration is looking at common formative assessments, and so that teachers can look at those and see what best practices in the classroom are moving the needle in terms of student learning. And we're getting closer to that point, but that's Terry and I have had many conversations about that.
I think that's what's important, is to understand what are the elements of that evaluation that the teachers are using, because I completely agree, and that's my point of this. What you're saying is so hard. What I don't understand is, because it's so hard, how can you have confidence that investing into this effort is the right focus? Because when I previously asked, what would you not do in some other context, the answer was nothing. We just continue doing things. You can never try new things with an of course effort to improve the result and never have anything that's not negative, that hasn't worked. That's just a normal process. And I've never seen anything that we would come out and say, look, we've tried this produced a negative outcome. We're not going to do this again. But here's other things that produce positive outcome. It seems like everything, like we're just investing time into things that we cannot causally associate with success. I believe, right? But we don't have the data that's telling us that is the case. And anecdotally, I have other evidence that can point out that it may not be. It depends on who you ask.
In investigating why constructing meaning, obviously it's research supported, and we have data from other districts that have implemented it. So then that's why our district implemented, because I asked that same question of Terry at the beginning of this year, why constructing meaning, why CM, and she was able to go off on a long list of the research that was done to adopt it. It does take time to see the results, but it is, I will say it is a challenge. So you base it off other people's research before you implement it yourself.
I will add to that, thank you, that in addition, it came out that there was lack of consistent tier 1 instructional strategies across all classes. So where did this come from? This came from when we had an outside organization do an audit on our programs. One of the items that came out, and we saw it with students, right? But that we're talking about differences in grading practices and alignments. Well, you have 6 different teachers and they all ask you to do the same thing 6 different ways, or they use 6 different platforms, and that lack of consistency sometimes creates a situation where a student spends more cognitive time trying to figure out what the teacher is asking them to do than the cognitive time of going in depth with what the content in the instruction actually is. And so to have some consistency in our routines allows the student to quickly access the curriculum and spend that cognitive load on the curriculum. And that was the start of our exploration of what does consistent tier 1 instructional strategies look like, and everything kept pointing to what we're doing right now.
So constructing meaning is a way to solve consistency issue?
Yes. We're asking consistency in the strategies that are being implemented with constructing meaning. That is correct.
I'm still not totally convinced about constructing meaning either in some regards, but I do agree that it probably helps in the consistency across. But what about the really quick thinker that can just come up with the answer like those 2 kids did? Maybe it's good to have examples or some cases where they have to go deeper like that. And then maybe once they learn that technique, they can quicker in their own mind apply those also. But if they can also come up with the answer so quick, which some can, is there any evidence of boredom or impatience with having to do all this just to get to the answer which you really already know? And then how do the teachers feel about having to change all, because it is a heck of a lot of work to make every lesson fit into this? Or is there some hybrid where some lessons are done this way, but some lessons are done more I don't know if you'd call it casually, but more just old fashioned lecture techniques or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, and the textbooks don't come this way.
Yeah, so I've met with the various cohorts that have already gone through training. The feedback that I am given is that they really see the value of doing this work and that it takes time to fold this into their lessons. And Catherine, you nailed it. They're not going to be able to, right out of the gate from the training, completely CMIs all of their lessons. It's going to take time. Some will have it, some will not. And then over the years, they start to build it in with more fullness into what the class infrastructure should look like.
Well, so is there any hybrid model where every class experiences using constructive meaning in some of the cases, but then there's more kind of broad, whichever way you work better, you could solve these problems rather than having everybody always do it this way? That's what I'm wondering.
Yes.
And then the other question I have is, this is a tier 1 support. Your next page, one of your last pages is remaining challenges, stronger tier 2 interventions for chronic absenteeism. So, okay, but can you enumerate several of the interventions you had in mind? Or you don't know what they are yet, but you're gonna have some.
For chronic absenteeism specifically?
For tier 2.
Yeah, so a couple of items. William Blair, again, I appreciate his leadership, has been working with the sites just recently. Thank you, board, for adopting new attendance policies and regulations. That's going to be a real strong step in helping us move forward with having some direction with how to respond to the different attendances. We've been cleaning up our ways of taking attendance, how attendance is counted. We have built in tiers of intervention for attendance that assistant principals are able to utilize. So when a student has so many absences, they have a specific type of outreach and determining what the potential challenge is. Then there's a list of possible interventions that can occur. We have seen improvement in our attendance, by the way, and both sites have also been implementing through the leadership of our principals after school programs or lunch programs where if a student is absent or tardy, they're making up that time. And so we're holding in some accountability as well.
So you actually have some forms or lists of those interventions?
Yes.
And that is part of your handbook or your
that's within our administration.
Okay.
And that's their tool for reference in working with students with
So those were my 2 questions having to do
Thank
with
you.
Still feeling iffy a bit on constructing meeting. I see some of the advantages, but I'm just not sure if it's doable for everybody all the time. And I know in my experience, I'd rather be given a choice of how to do something than always have to do it a certain way. After, maybe I have to learn that way of doing it, but then if I want to do it a different way, I can. You know, if I've showed proficiency in being able to do it a certain way.
It's
so
not.
I don't know if that can work in this kind of high school environment or not, but I mean.
Fair enough. I'll definitely take this into consideration. I'll say it's not lockstep. There's different evidence-based instructional routines that are modifiable, whether you're in chemistry or English, math, world language. It's not forcing everybody to do it one way, but it's instructional routines that you implement with your content. And so I'm not sure if it's coming across like it's lockstep in that matter, but it absolutely is not. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, I'll also bring up constructive meanings. There are concerns on my side as well. Part of it is tracking success indeed, and I hear you guys that it takes time. However, if you're implementing something so costly that takes such a long time, we have to have some assurances along the way that we are going in the right direction. I have not, been exposed to the research on, sort of where you guys came up with these ideas, nor to any of the recommendations on what are the innovative tier one instructional practices that this particular consultant recommended, and what is the reason we chose this one versus something else. Also not sure what does the research on constructive meaning say in terms of what results does it drive. So I think sharing that information would be helpful, and figuring out how do we track that we are on the right track, right? Like some interim and milestone metrics. Otherwise, this will continue to come up because it's going to take many years till we see results. And what if we don't see them?
Yeah.
Right. And the implementation of any research, any idea, that's sort of the key part to driving results. It may not be fit in our environment. It's hard to say. My own observation from MVLA partnership meeting where we did an exercise simulating constructive meaning is that it is very helpful for students who sort of have more challenges. It definitely allows them to develop more and get more confidence and feel more comfortable, which is very, very important. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that. But it also can slow down other students, and it takes quite a long time. And from talking to the teachers, it does mean one will cover less material. For some classes, this might be a challenge for AP exams that expect certain knowledge, or maybe there is some lack as to what falls on the AP. For some classes, this may be less of a problem, but this doesn't feel like a slam dunk at all. In fact, I feel like we should be tracking how much less material are we actually teaching. Otherwise, 2 years down the road, we see lower grades, and we are going to say, well, we don't know what it is, because we can't really like associate specific initiatives with the result. I want to be in that situation. We already are seeing some downward trends in the SBOC scores.
Yeah.
We don't want to add on top of that. So,
well, first of all, constructing meaning pulls from all great research. Marzano, Tomlinson for differentiation, Linda Darlin Hammond, Billings. And so it is not something new, but it helps to pull from the best research that's evidence-based and packages it in a way that helps students, or excuse me, teachers unpack it and think about what does this look like on a regular level in my classes. Second of all, I think it's important for us to understand the complexity of what we're trying to accomplish, and that it does take time. And the challenges the students who are, let's say, are unduplicated, it's not a one-size quick fix, but it is ongoing work that's consistent that will support this core instruction that we need to. And then the last item, I appreciate you saying this, I think tracking scores is very important. I believe that there is a thought out there that breadth versus depth equals good curriculum and rigor. And I would like for us to also challenge our thoughts on how depth can also support our students in really gaining the skills of going deep dive and learning the curriculum, and not surface covering all of the various topics within, a 32 chapter book. Yes, it is a challenge with our AP classes that have a core set of curriculum that they will be tested on, which is one of the reasons why I am working with a few AP teachers to learn how this can be supported while adhering to their college prep curriculum. So thank you.
And thank you, Terry. Appreciate that. What is the evidence what is the impact that the research says this is driving? What specific metrics are we supposed to drive as constructive meaning? Is it grades? Is it something else?
Well, multi-tier, when we see where our gaps are in our data, from SBET gaps to Ds and Fs to A to G to college career readiness, we see persistent trending gaps of certain students not achieving at the same level as their peers. That is what's driving constructing meaning. How are we supporting all students to engage in academic discourse and access curriculum? At the same time, what are we doing that is also evidence-based, that will show that shows that our unduplicated students can access that curriculum with the right structures, the right scaffolding, and that's what this program brings.
Got it. So sounds like you're hoping for results across everything. Like, or certain population groups across CA STEP dashboards, indicators.
I think if we see them in the Ds and Fs, we're going to start to see it in the A to Gs. We're going to start to see it in the graduation rate. We're going to eventually start to see it in some of our state tests. That they are all interconnected. I don't think these gaps exist because there's different challenges that a student has with each of those different data points. I believe it is all interconnected.
Got it, got it.
Some we may see stronger results than others. I think a student who has been in the country for a year and 3 months taking a junior level ELA test is always going to find more challenges accessing that test than an English language student who has been in the English system for their entire school career. And so I want to be careful of painting the not painting the complexities of the data correctly as well.
Yeah, completely. I just want us to be careful about tracking non-intended outcomes for some other student populations. That's number one. And second, I want to make sure we are fully thinking through about our students being competitive on a state and national level, right? Because other schools may not be implementing this approach. Other schools may be covering more material, right? And, we could have a different philosophy here, but at the end of the day, all these students are supposed to go to college and be competitive. So we have to be very careful as to how to change our approaches. So thank you.
100% agree. Thank you.
So first of all, on constructing meaning, I actually really appreciated your presentation to the board on constructing meaning. Perhaps the part that's missing is actually going to a classroom and hearing constructing meaning. I actually understood the philosophy behind it, and I understand what you're saying about it solving multiple issues. To me, this is kind of like when solving math 5 ways, and I don't remember what it's called, but a lot of parents are like, I don't get this, I don't understand, it's slowing things down. And in fact, there are a lot of students who did not have good numeracy skills and were like, well, I can solve it this one way, but in fact, they couldn't solve it the other 4 ways. And in fact, that greater depth led to greater math scores. And that's been proven in Matthew Wisman. So I think, but it takes time. It's not like you do constructing meaning and then the next year, yay, we're this takes a long time.
The next
but I think you have to understand the philosophy and how it's implemented in the classroom. And I think that is complicated. And I can understand it from what you were telling me because I've seen similar philosophies implemented in the classroom. So based on what you told me, I can imagine it in the classroom. And I could imagine it being taught at all different levels. But I think if that's not clear to people, then they should go to an AP class and see it. I did have some specific questions though on the LCAP. So the first was the English language learners. I am still concerned about them. They're still only orange on our dashboard. Yes, we have made some improvements. However, we're continuous improvements. And my main question, which you don't need to answer tonight, but I really question it because parents ask me about it, is do we have a central program at 2 sites or do we have 2 programs at 2 different sites? The feedback I'm getting is we have 2 programs at 2 different sites and it's confusing. And we're teaching to a standardized test. I mean, it's a standardized test they need to pass. Yes, they need English proficiency and they're being taught a standardized test that they need to pass in order to move on to access our general curriculum. So I really have a question around that. And I certainly think parents do. And I think that needs to be explained and articulated better. And along with that, our PK and DLEC participation rates, while they have increased, they are not comparable to comparable districts that have 25% Latino population. So I think that's something worth looking at. How are we presenting information? We present a lot of information in written Spanish. Is that the most accessible? Probably not, because most families I know do not speak. They weren't educated to the level of formal Spanish. That's quite a high level of education. My own Spanish, which is, not that high, I can speak in informal Spanish. I cannot write, a formal Spanish educational thing. So I think that's something to look at. And then finally, I would like to look at in mental health. We've been asked over and over for a screener. The Mountain View High School PTSA went so far as to create their own. So they really wanted one. So my question is, do we have one? If we don't, why not? And if we do have one, why did the Mountain View PTSA create their own? So this seems to be a real need that the community has said they want to have. I don't know the costs and benefits of it, but I think we need to, if we're not going to do it, I think we need to tell the community why. And if we are, then we need to do it. We've been talking about it since I've been on the board, and we haven't done it. So if there are good reasons not to do it, that's totally fine. But I think we need to hear it clearly and why. And if we are going to do it, we need to just do it. Because I just keep hearing, and parents are literally telling me, I'm worried. I don't know if my child has a mental health issue. What do I do? And so now they have the screener, and it scares me a little bit because it's just a screener where a parent is filling out. There's no school involvement. So I don't know what happens to that screener. I think it's great that they took the initiative to do it. And I also feel that, this should be something that the district should be taking we take the well-being of our students very seriously. We have it's good that our metrics are going upwards, and we still have a mental health issue.
Thank you. I do want to speak to the ELD Central Program very briefly, can come back with more details. I do want to challenge the question about if it's a central program or not. Both sites have 4 level of ELD. Both sites use the same reclassification program. Both sites have the same social studies classes that are SEDI or ELL, as well as science. As well, both sites push into general education classes equally, and this coming up school year, 25-26, both schools are piloting cohorting ELD students in grade level English and grade level math. In addition to that, we have a very similar system of how we're supporting our LTELs, preparing for the LPAC, and some small differences, but consistency in implementing and administrating the LPAC. Has there been ongoing centralization of the ELD district-wide program over the last course of the 2 years? Absolutely. And perhaps it would be helpful to come back and speak in greater detail. So for those who have questions about is it central or not, we can provide that clarity. As well as the mental health screener, I'm not sure if this is a moment to speak to that or not. I think that could be coming back at a later meeting so we can go in depth on that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terry, for the sake of time.
And
Let's
Esme,
move
after
on.
you're done with your questions, I have.
Oh,
on our
we're gonna just keep moving, Catherine. It's 9:30. Did you?
This is just a presentation.
Yeah, we're not taking any action right now. Close public hearing. Alrighty, we're gonna move on to 10.3, which is first reading and public hearing.
Yes, good evening. As Terry mentioned, 2013, when LCFF changed the funding formula at the state level, budgets had predated that. But what happened was the state's going to give districts money. make decisions locally, but how do we hold them accountable, hence the LCAP. So it's intentional that LCAP and budget come at a public hearing and then adopted at a subsequent meeting. So we will start moving through the budget being proposed that has been developed for next fiscal year. Some of these initial slides are repeats from every budget presentation we do, just to remind everyone about how budget and finance supports ultimately those district goals. We're aware of AB 1200 in the context for why we do budgets, the multi-year projection of it. That's more for reference. And here we are at even though we just finished one school year in graduation, we're almost about to the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, but this is the kickoff for the new fiscal year. But Elvis and I and the team have been working on actually for the past several months. So that's where we are in the annual cycle of budget development. So very, very high level. You look at total revenue expected for next year, it's topping 150 million. And that's all revenue from all sources combined. That's the takeaway figure with current planned expenditures of 146,426,000 and change. And so assuming all those things happen, which they won't, because budgets are exactly, they're estimates, so they're exactly wrong, but because things are going to change, I would show an increase to the fund balance of 3.7 million. When we unpack that a little bit, and again, we're still saying high level, I think a key takeaway is when we look at that 150 million of revenue, it's only equates to 1.4% total growth year over year, right? And a lot of times we focus on what's property tax doing, because that's for our district, that's the main driver of it. But in the broader budget packet, one of the pages, the beautiful pie chart, we emphasize that only 81% of our budget of revenue comes from our local property taxes. So 19% is coming from other sources. So what's happening when we say we are anticipating 5% growth in our secured property taxes, that means the other sources of revenue are either flat, as we see with the minimum state aid, which has been flat from 2013 at 2.9 million, or sometimes sources are decreasing. So we have at the bottom, when you look at total federal revenue, it's going down percentage-wise. It's not a large dollar amount, but percentage-wise, just under 14%. Total other state revenue, not wrapped up in the LCFF property tax line, is going down by 19%. And other local revenue going down by 9.5%. Now that number might change as donations increase. We reference here the Shoreline Educational Enhancement Reserve. At next week's meeting, we're going to be bringing a new 10-year agreement with the city of Mountain View and Mountain View Wispin that will improve that number slightly. We do appreciate the foundation's ongoing support of the district and recognize their contribution of just under 2.2 million. But I think that it's an important takeaway to look at holistically what's happening with total revenue. Because although 5% growth on property taxes is good, that is supporting the lack of growth or actually decline in revenue in other areas. And so that's an important takeaway we want to focus on here. On the expenditure side, how we develop the budget is we start with the educational programs and costs from our current year, and we roll that over, right? So we don't start from zero and build back the budget saying, how many teachers do we want to have? And how many Chromebooks do we want to purchase? We look at what we did this year, copy that over, and then we make adjustments, right? We add staff depending on programs, we reduce staff depending on programs. We look at our equipment purchases, did that meet our needs? We need to increase, decrease that. As we've highlighted before, personnel costs, so that's certificated salaries, classified salaries, and all their associated benefits, both medical benefits and the statutory benefits, which is retirement programs and other required payroll costs. That equates to 83% of the budget. So when we talk about making adjustments to the budget, it's people driven. We have adjusted staffing based upon program enrollment. So middle college, we talked about, enrollment has changed. So their staffing has adjusted proportionally for the moment. Same thing with special ed. A lot of kudos. You'll see another slide. The special ed department staff are looking at what are the appropriate caseload ratios and so forth. For your reference is the average salary benefit cost of a teacher, what we project health and welfare benefits to increase by, and then for reference, some of those statutory costs, CSRS and PERS, the certificated and classified retiree program costs that we pay on top of the salaries cost for those entities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elvis. We realize it's late in the evening and there's a lot of numbers on here. He's going to unpack unrestricted, restricted, but we might go a little faster than we planned for, just given the current time, and it is a first reading and public hearing. So try to be brief. Right.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Unrestricted again, very property taxes, it's most of my income right here, about 115 million we're projected for next year. Like Mike said, 2.9 of that is state aid money that we get, and the rest is 6 million is unsecured. Again, restricted is pretty much a lot of this is special ed driven. So it's special ed and other local accounts that we have in our budgets. Here are the expenditures based on certificate salaries, classified salaries, employees, books, and operating expense. As you can see, very again, unrestricted, restricted again. So a lot of this restricted side is special ed driven. A lot of the restricted account where it pretty much has strings attached. So we are only allowed to spend this money in these parameters and what we're given the money for. Moving on to the next capital outlay, you see that our expenditures are where they are at the end, they match. Already, we have an increase on unrestricted because this is based on this information is based on not a salary schedule increase yet. Because this is based on prior to not having developed the budget before anything has been agreed on by the board. So we always in our past go with it without even checking it. So this is what it's based on. Again, restricted is we're spending down money that we've had and we're carrying over so that you can see the decrease. And this is where the 3.7 million is number is. But again, this number, the increase does not include any salary increases for any units. As you can tell, we go further out, beginning balances. We have there's numbers we can balance with. Again, unrestricted, restricted again is money that we have that we keep in our pocket, that we have from programs that we get up front. Some of them is CT money, some of it's Prop 28. All these accounts that we have is money that we have on the restricted side. And assigned and unrestricted, it's the reserve for economic uncertainty. That's the mandatory 3% that we have to keep in there for the state. Next one, this is about the salary increases. This is the cost of 1% for all salary and bargaining units. It's $955,000 for everyone that's in the district office. District office, but in all schools. So go to the next slide. I'm showing that this first column in the middle shows what we currently are at without salary increases. The next line is if everyone agrees to the salary increases. Of course, expenditures go up because mostly salary and benefits driven, and we still have a surplus of 110,000 with a 4% increase for everyone. This is district reserves. Again, this is based on information without the 4% increases. So $28 million is what we have in current reserves. The 2-month expenditures is 24 million. So we're above the cost of the reserves. But again, these numbers can't change once we agree and settle in the 4% goes across, but these numbers can't change. And on the footnote, it says where we pull these numbers from. So if you see the big sheet that we gave you guys, it's on the bottom. We'll have the footnote of the account that we pull this data from.
It just shows our historical enrollment trends as well as what we're using for our assumptions as it relates to staffing for the multi-year projection. So it's an estimate of how many students we'll have enrolled next year, which we work closely with Ed Services on. And then the changes in the future 2 years come straight out of our demographic study and really looking at the change. So there's a slight increase in 26, 27. And so we'll staff accordingly, and then a even smaller decrease the other way in the following year. And so those trends have been tracked pretty closely to the prior demographic study as well as the new one that we I think commissioned a year ago. So that's more just data for you to look at. We've tried to include some more historical trends in these presentations. And again, I already referenced the total revenue growth, but you can see prior years what that looked like for context. When you see double digits, what happened in those years predominantly was a lot of one-time money. So 2021 was that first full fiscal year after COVID, and then some more rounds of that in the 22-23 school year. So you can see the impact that happens. Now, the state budget has still not been decided. Information is changing. Mr. Volta even shared an update earlier today about the legislature's response and looking more and more likely that some proposed one-time money might be heavily reduced. So a lot is still TBD. So in many ways, we're thankful that we're a little bit insulated from some of those swings at the state level by our local funding we receive. Similarly, historical trends in special education, I alluded to it earlier. I think the key takeaway here is giving credit a lot to the finance office, but also working closely with special ed to look, when you look at that bottom line, the general fund contribution, 5 years ago, what that was in the growth, and you look at but next year compared to this year, minimal growth and what's needed from the unrestricted general fund to help support those costs. What's happening there is looking, like we said, at those caseload sizes, class size ratios, what's the staffing needed? When there's vacancies, do we need to fill that vacancy or do we have the appropriate staffing needed? Because you can see the revenue for special education does not increase in proportion to the cost of the year. So what we can do to minimize that contribution from the general fund is powerful and important, and we're starting to see some evidence of that. Back to Elvis, the colorful charts, looking at the multi-year projection, lots of numbers we're not going to talk about.
And this is our our projection for the next 3 years. The only increases you'll see is our property taxes. We increased 5% the other 3 years. That third year is always a hard one to predict because it's always, we're trying to figure out what's going to be 3 years from now. But that's the increases you'll see in the revenue is mostly on property tax going up on the revenue side. Again, this is all salaries for everyone and books and operating expenses. So a lot of these certificated salaries, classified salaries, every year we'll have such a cost increase because every year goes up and we get that increase on their spending column. This is a lot of the increases in the middle of the salaries, and then the benefits, the 5% that we project out for both years of what insurance could cost us potentially out. Next slide again shows total expenditures, multi-year projection. Again, will show you that we are increasing, and none of these. This is information based on not having an increase built in yet. But if you look at the increase for each year, you'll see high enough numbers that this will cover the increase that we projected, 4% increases for the outer years. So this shows the increases on there. This is all one spreadsheet. This is what you guys have. The big one is just to show it to everyone else that what it looks like, including adult education, cafeteria, not other funds, bonds, capital facilities, which is developer fees and all the other accounts that we have. So very a lot of the restrictions that we deal with a lot is on the left side. Everything else is spoken for on the right, very restricted to what we need to do it for.
I'll just add a reference to the budget packet, the page right before you get to the general fund and all the accounting code structure formats lists more detailed the main assumptions for the multi-year projection, so you can reference that. And the timing is challenging, but we're looking at all those scenarios with the same agenda. One of the next items after consolidated motion is possibly approving, ratification of an agreement with the District Teachers Association. Well, that's just one entity. There's CSCA, there's unrepresented groups. So we wanted to balance how much do we add that information in? Is it presumptuous to assume it'll be approved? We haven't done it for all bargaining units. But earlier in the meeting, when we had the public hearing, one of the documents, or some of the documents, is the public disclosure of the financial impact of those agreements. So that included, we didn't present on it, but included the impact of the multi-year projection with this additional salary costs should it be approved. So that was referenced elsewhere in the same meeting. And this was just kind of an overall summary of that. So we continue to monitor the state budget. I already referenced that. When we made this slide, there was potential 1.3 million for the district in one-time funds. Eric's shaking his head, so we might strike that out. It might be zero or a much smaller amount. So in some ways, that's why we don't always include those assumptions, especially when we don't need it to have a positive or balanced budget. We will adjust the property tax revenue. It's still a projection at this point. When we meet the county in August is when we actually look at tax revenue and receipts they have. We adjust salary and benefit costs. We're still hiring. We've hired a lot of people. We're still hiring some. HR places on the salary schedule. that actually determines the specific dollar amount that we will pay. In budget development time, it references more of that average cost we talked about. And then we close the books after June 30th, rolls to the new year. And so we, finish up the prior fiscal year, those ending balances become next year's beginning balances, and you'll see that adjustment at first interim. And we come back to you to do this process again. So that, this is again, the normal cheat sheet of how you can read all the very detailed, dense forms later, and the different fund numbers. We have a great team, see them there. And that concludes our presentation for the budget public hearing. Next fiscal year.
Thank you, Elvis. Were there any questions or comments?
It's a first reading, right?
I just had a brief question. How confident are you? Maybe this is more for Mr. Volta. How confident are you in the federal revenue?
How confident am I in any federal policy or what we hear? So far, what we've been told is the formula-based monies with the feds will most likely not be changed unless Congress acts to change them. And that's the greatest, that's about $1.1 million, 1.9, I think is what we went over, maybe a little bit more than one special ed and Title I. Those are untouchable, and quite honestly, what we hear from Washington is they don't want those. The challenges with the federal budget is cuts to other health resources from states is impacting the state budget. And so that's why they're looking at the state's looking at the $12 billion shortfall and trying to work Prop 98 so that they can guard against the bigger shortfall in other areas. That one-time money piece, that was recession insurance that the governor likes to use to allocate Prop 98 money, but not allocate it for the following year, even though they have it.
Okay. Thank you.
I had a question also. Speaking of health and welfare, you projected the increase of 5%. That's not sped. That's just health and welfare in the general fund. But adding into that, what William Blair is working on in terms of billing back to Medi-Cal and stuff, some medical expenses that are related to mental health. Did you consider that, or does that help this increase or decrease this increase? Or?
Yeah, so no, short answer, we have not included any of that. It's still so many years in the future is my understanding, even talking to William and Terry and Eric in terms of the districts that are just now, who've been working on this for a couple of years, billing those initial ones. So,
okay. So that's not going to affect us for next year, in other words.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully last question. So you guys projected an increase in state and federal and state revenue for the next 3 years, but this year it went significantly down. I'm curious what was the rationale behind that?
You're talking about in the multi-year projection,
Yeah,
right?
Multi-year
Those
projection.
numbers going up.
Yeah.
Some of it, let's say COLA increases that we have, small increases. Well,
They are small, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious, since it went down very noticeably this year, what's the rationale?
So for instance, two parts of the answer. Projecting forward, it's just the cost of living adjustment, COLA only. When you compare it to this year, why it went down. So we was the old state partnership pathway this year.
This year, yeah.
So we got 1.9 million. This was something that CTE applied for in state money, Golden Pathways Partnership Program. So that's an infusion of revenue this year, which spikes it. And so next year, when that's gone away, that's part of what creates that significant decrease in year-to-year comparison is a big one. Prop 28 is ongoing, so that shouldn't make much of a difference. It adjusts every year depending on Prop 98. There's I think some other state money, one time or small amount.
A through G. The one that was Perry, that one's another one that dropped off if they were done spending.
Got it. It sounds like some things were a one-time revenue last year and now it's showing as a decrease, but it was one time.
So, yeah, and sometimes
And-
it's the year, and like CT incentive grant is another example. There's multiple rounds of it. But depending on which year you receive the money, might impact that year higher, even if you're spending it over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move to consolidated, the consolidated agenda. And I think just a clarification that we pulled 11 point.
No, we did not.
Okay, I think it's still showing up online.
No, it's not showing.
Okay,
The last.
so we are considering it for, okay, good. Okay, so 11.1 through 11.29.
No,
Oh, sorry,
11.28.
28, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing to pull for discussion, then I can get a motion.
Motion to approve 11.1 to 11.28.
Oh, and second.
Moved by Theta, seconded by Alex. Board, all in favor?
Aye.
5-0 to approve items 11.1 through 11.28. Which leads us to our business action items. 13.1, approval of the proposed tentative agreement with the district's Teachers Association and the district.
Motion to approve the proposed tentative agreement with the district, Teachers Association and the district.
I second.
Okay, moved by Theta, seconded by Alex. Board, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0 to approve 13.1. And then we have 13.2, a first reading of the mobile communication devices. And this is, we're not taking action, but more information. Is there anything?
This information is identical to the information that was presented last week. Only in the CSBA format, and it is consistent with our current mobile device policies on our site. And we did review these with our principals to make sure that they were consistent, and it is. That's a first reading, so no action is taken.
Were there any questions for staff on this one right now? Okay. So we'll see this again for action. I will, the board will see this again for action.
What is it for policy going into place?
We don't.
It's a mandate by law. We currently have something like this in our board policy under conduct. Last year, the state legislature said boards must have a mobile device policy separate from other.
Okay, dedicated policy basically.
It gave school sites, school districts the permission to greatly restrict the use of cell devices, if not possession of, on campuses. We're not taking that approach.
You ready to move on to 13.3? Yep, all right, let's move on to 13.3.
Okay. Like you want to do.
Yeah. So, this item is a presentation when it goes along with the annual agreement with the Cumming Group, for the program support services they provide. It's something we've had in place since the inception of Measure E, where it's a budgeted amount in the overall bond program, but every year we bring an annual contract for those services. It actually predates Measure E. It was the same process we did with Measure A in 2010. But I know this year there's been some additional questions about the contract and how it's structured and what it's for. So I'm talking with Eric about bringing the contract forward, we thought best to invite Rick Kramer to come present to maybe shed a little more context and background on what those services are, how it's structured, the history behind it, the why, in order to be able to move forward and answer any questions the board may have, ultimately with the agenda item to approve the contract for next year. And this is a consistent practice going back to when it was Kramer Project Development and then became RGM Kramer. Now, so with that, I will turn it over to Rick Kramer and invite him up to the podium to present and share and answer any questions you may have. Okay, take it away, Rick.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, good evening. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you for allowing us to be of service to the district. Once again, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Rick Kramer. I am managing principal of Cumming Group. And what that means is that that's the title they give to original founders of acquired companies, I guess. And I've been working with the district for 18 years now. And as Mike mentioned, originally under Kramer Project Development Company, which was a company I founded in 2003, merged with a friend of mine's company in 2019, Ralph Caputo, RGM and Associates. And then in 2022, we were approached by Cumming Group and went through the acquisition. Cumming Group is an international program and construction management company. It's an agency construction management company. We don't actually do any construction. We provide construction services. It's very important for us to not have that conflict of interest. We want to represent owners, be the owner's agent, have a fiduciary duty to the owners. And I believe we're probably the largest company in North America, frankly, that does that type of agency construction management. We have about 3,000 people, I guess. Very prevalent on the East Coast. We manage construction of NFL stadiums. We're doing the Tennessee Titans Stadium, complete rebuild of JFK Airport, $10 billion project. We manage the Sphere in Vegas. And our biggest clients are Disney and Amazon. So very, very involved in construction throughout the country and in Europe. We were recently featured on TV, Lifetime Channel, Military Makeover Operation Career, which I was very proud to be part of. It's about people within Cumming Group that transitioned to the private sector and all about that. And if anyone's interested, I can provide the link to that. But yeah, it was on national TV. Cumming Group used to be one of our competitors when we were with RGM Kramer, and actually Kramer Project Development Company before that. Frankly, they weren't doing too well in Northern California. As far as public construction, school construction work, they just couldn't get a foothold here. They didn't have good management up here, and frankly, they struggled. Very prevalent in Southern California, probably LA Unified's largest construction manager down in San Diego, just couldn't get a foothold here. And frankly, that's why they approached us. RGM Kramer is doing extremely well. We had worked with about 30 school districts. We had a good reputation here. And so if you can't beat them, join them, I guess, was their philosophy. And so they acquired us. Now Cumming Group looks entirely different in Northern California, K-12 market, because frankly, most of the people are former RGM Kramer people who are managing it. And operationally, Cumming Group really doesn't tell us what to do operationally. Yeah, frankly, self-admittedly, they said, hey, you guys do things better than we did up here in Northern California. And it's not broke. We don't want to fix it. Just keep doing what you're doing. And the staff that's been on this account is still staff that I hired in Kramer Project Development Company, 15 and 7 years. Pat and Mary have been with me for a long time. Kent Judd, who went through the entire Measure A program, as well as the Measure E program to date, and Michael Ford, I think some of you might have met, all former Kramer Project Development Company people, and we're still doing things the same way we did before. So, Dr. Groves brought me into the district in 2007. There were a lot of remnants from the Measure D program, which some of you may remember from the back late 1990s, early 2000. There was defective construction. All the plan files were a mess. And probably the worst thing is that none of your Measure D projects were DSA certified. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute, but that was a huge concern to the district. I spent a lot of hours at this podium, not so much in the last 5 years, but in the past, speaking to former boards. I think it's probably good that I just tell you a little bit about my background, because I've really been the most influential person on helping you guys set up your construction programs and manage them. I spent the first 11 years of my career actually on your side of the table. I was a former Navy officer in the Civil Engineer Corps, spent 8 years serving my country. And that's where I really learned how to do this kind of work. First 4 years I was at the Naval Air Station, Fallon, Nevada. It's about 300 miles east of here. We completely rebuilt the base to make it the premier Navy pilot training facility in the world. We moved Top Gun there, built new runway, hangars, control tower, housing, training facilities, maintenance facilities, commissary exchange, pretty much did everything. I got there kind of near the tail end of the program. And when I got there, we had about 8 military officers, including myself, and about 30 civilians working in the construction office. When I left, there were just two officers and 8 civilians. And what this really meant is that I was the guy who got to clean up everyone's messes. As the officers left, they handed their projects off to me. And there was a lot of claims, litigation. We were even fighting a contractor fraud case. I got to work with the real NCIS, trying to resolve that. But I learned, it was frustrating, but I really learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to clean up distressed projects. But most importantly, it showed me how to not get into those situations in the first place. And so after that, I spent 4 years as the facility officer, staff civil engineer for the submarine base in San Diego, which was another aspect of construction industry. I am a licensed architect, but I really didn't follow that typical career path. I really focused on facilities and construction management for my career. In 1994, I made the difficult decision to resign my commission so I could take advantage of a fellowship to go to Stanford and earn my construction engineering degree, which I did. And Stanford actually hired me before I even graduated to manage their housing construction program. I was pretty much the oldest person in the program by that time. And so I did that for a couple of years. And so then I left the owner's side. and decided to round out my resume and go work for a general contractor for a couple of years. And that was very much an eye-opening experience. And I learned a lot about how contractors think and operate, which has served me and my clients well. And then I did my first school project, I think 1999. Went to Oak Grove School District and helped them with a very distressed project. Turned it around, got the project done, and then they asked me to manage their whole program. And so I formed my first construction management company with the owner of that construction company, and did that for several years. Really learned school construction. Then the .com bust hit. Relationship got a little strained with my business partner at that time, so I sold out to him and formed Kramer Project Development Company. Been building schools, renovating schools ever since. The past 25 years, it's what I know. It's what I do, and gotten pretty good at it. Program. When you approach program management, I've learned that you really need to do it by analyzing risk. So I think Mike will attest to all the advice I give, the guidance I give. It's really about alleviating risk. And to think like that, it's a pretty pessimistic approach. I'm always thinking about what could go wrong. And that's how I keep things from going wrong, right? But, that's the approach I take, and that's what I instill in my staff as well. And the types of risk, really what we learned in construction management school is you've got quality risk, schedule risk, financial risk. Those are the main three, and they're all tied together. The joke is which two do you want, but really you've got to address all of them, and you've got to have a reasonable amount of all of them addressed, because if you fail at any of them, then the last one comes into play, which is political risk. Schedule affects cost. Okay, schedule, time is money, and I'll show you a slide of that in a minute. Just a quick story that's probably going to hit close to home for some of you. I think I can tell it now because it happened a quarter of a century ago. I got asked to work with a school district, elementary school district, very close to here. They had a bond program to renovate their 6 elementary schools, open a closed school for a 7th elementary school, and renovate their 2 middle schools. And I came in they asked me to come in for the project to reopen the closed school. They were expanding it, reopening it, with the intent of having 7 schools. It was during the .com boom, enrollment was growing, and I should have switched the slide. Enrollment was growing, and they needed to reduce class sizes. The district decided they were going to save money after they passed the bond program and managed the program internally. They put a principal who was near retirement in charge of the program, and they were going to hire project managers on staff to manage it. The program got a late start. They got underway with the 2 middle school projects and the renovating, opening the closed school. The middle school projects were going okay, but the project to open the closed school was stopped dead after construction started due to a CEQA issue. They self-admittedly didn't address CEQA at all. They didn't know anything about it. And so it got stopped. The contractor on the project was probably the most nefarious contractor I've ever worked with in my entire career. And he was exploiting every advantage. He put in a $2 million claim to get the project going again. I worked with districts, legal counsel for about 2 months. We ended up negotiating about $1.5 million settlement with this guy, which in today's dollars is about $4 million. Okay. And, self-admittedly, the principal who was in charge of the program said he thought it was going to be easier than it was. And long story short, we took over the construction of that project, managed it to completion. The quality wasn't very good, which pains me to say, but the hand was kind of dealt with the contractor we were working with. The district let that principal retire. They ended up letting the 2 project managers go. One was pretty good. The other one was terrible. And, we took over the projects, but really the damage was done. The middle school projects were way over designed, scoped, over designed. The district got down to the last 2 schools and they ran out of money and weren't able to do the last 2 elementary schools. Meanwhile, the dot-com busted and enrollment projections were falling short. They just opened and renovated a new school. And so they decided they had to close the school, which happened to be the district's smallest school in the wealthiest part of the district. And I think some of you know which school I'm talking about at this time. So I was part of that. I know they're still struggling with it. It was a political nightmare. And so this is how all these other things tie into political risk. And so it's important that you have people know what they're doing, helping you through your bond program. People who are credentialed, experienced to do that.
Just a quick time check for you. Want to make sure we get through everything. We do have, it's 10:11 and we have about maybe, 10 more minutes or so. So I want to make sure we can get to the rest of the presentation.
I'm sorry about that. So this is a slide that will talk long. And frankly, I'm done with this slide, so we'll move on. We are not your program manager. We provide program management services. Your program manager is Mike Matheson. He directs the program. He's doing double duty throughout the course of the end of Measure A, all of Measure B, and he took that on in addition to his already full-time job. I guess Mike decided he had a couple gray-haired, receding hairline architects to help him with it, with about 70 years of combined experience, me and Mark Toki from QBA. And so we basically have done the heavy lifting for Mike. It's still been a burden. He's been responsible for all the decision making and getting decisions made. Our program agreements are fair to both parties. It simply reimburse our hours for what you ask us to do or what you need us to do. And it's very flexible, can change at any time. And frankly, the programs have the contracts have a two-week termination notice. So they're really not risky for the district. But they're fair to both us and QBA for providing those services. And because we don't know from one year to the next, or frankly, one season to the next, what services we'll really have to provide, because programs inevitably change. This is really the best for the district to revisit this on an annual basis. I know Cumming Group would love to see a very large contract, multi-year contract, because that looks good in the contract backlog, valuation of the business, et cetera. But My personal opinion is that's not in the best interest of the district. Doing these hourly agreement or annual revisiting of it is really in the best interest of the district. Some districts want us to do long-term contracts. Fremont Unified just hired us to manage their $900 million program. They gave us an 8-year contract. 8-year contract that, you know, has assumptions and projections. And Cumming Group really like that, but, you know, I couldn't imagine the reaction if the district decided to terminate that contract and how that would look for our team and the investors in Cumming Group. And then we have project-specific agreements, and these are for the individual projects that we manage on your behalf. QKA primarily for the design, us for the pre-construction services and construction management. We work closely with QKA and on these fee-based multi-year contract. We could talk more about the project-specific design and CM contracts. Probably best for another meeting because that's a lengthy discussion, gets into project delivery methods, and really that's all based on risk management as well. Difference between program management support, which is hourly, and the project agreements, which are fee-based. Under the project agreements, we manage design, construction documents, estimating, permitting, bidding, construction, logistics, site management, coordination, contract management, DSA certification. And that's between us and QKA. Program management is not project specific. Okay, this is the hourly, do whatever's asked of us, do what's needed of us. It's master planning, feasibility study, scope development, program implementation, logistics, bond sales, state funding program management, manage the budgets, track costs, do cash flow analysis, master schedule, systems oversight committee support, audit support, status reports, non-contractor vendor procurement, board prep and presentations, community engagement, dispute management, and probably most importantly, statute compliance. Make sure we keep you guys out of trouble. We have to keep up on all the statutes, know what they are, know what you can do, and know what you can't do, and advise you accordingly. Because this thing that really gets districts in trouble is if they violate statutes. So how do you know who does what? Early on in the program, and any program I start for that matter, one of the most important things we do is define roles and responsibilities, determine which vendor is doing what for you. We have a list of 80 some tasks and responsibilities that we do for you. And in those tasks, we determine whether the program support contract, the construction management contract, the architect contract, and or the DSA inspector contract, who in that is responsible for that activity and who assists in that. Mark Patoki and I took the first pass at it, had a discussion with Mike, made edits, and then took that to Jeff Harding and had the conversation with him. And we did that before we got any contracts issued. And so we set up the program that way, and our contracts that way, and have been managing it ever since. That roles and responsibilities is an exhibit in all our contracts, and I think you can see it in our program agreement there as well, which defines what we do under that contract and the others for that matter. The objective really is ensure that nothing slips through the cracks that can kill us, kill the program. And probably more importantly, tells you who to hold accountable for that activity if it's not done well. Just real quickly, program successes. I'm very proud of our work at the district. I think of anything in my 38-year career, what we've done at this district is what I'm most proud of. We've really transformed these schools since I first set foot on here. I look at all the pictures I took previously, even Google Earth, go back in time and look. And just these schools have changed drastically. And we've done high quality construction work. Hasn't been without problems. There's always some construction problems that get built and you have to deal with, but I don't believe we've left any major things. Anytime you're dealing with new technology and such, door hardware, cardless entry, that was something new that we've never done with districts. And that's been a challenge. And I haven't seen that done in any other districts on the scale that we did that here. Timely construction, we've delivered every project when it needed to be delivered. We've had some delays during the pandemic, but we've still got the projects done when they needed to be. No statute violations or challenges, that's huge. State funding management, this was really unexpected. We ended up getting 63 million in eligibility, already received 36 million in. And the only reason we got that 36 million already is because we really attacked the program and got it going and got the projects in line for that funding early. LEED certification on key projects, districts don't do this. It shows that your building's high quality and building with a low carbon footprint, energy efficient. All projects DSA certified. And basically all the former projects are DSA certified as well. And what this means is the state takes liability for anything that happens in those facilities. If they're not certified, the district and board members can be personally held liable for anything, injuries, deaths, all the bad stuff that can happen in those buildings. So you guys aren't exposed to that. No contractor litigation or claims. Of course, we've had disputes we had to resolve. It's kind of a daily occurrence for Pat and Mary. You guys don't see most of that. I do a lot of saber rattling negotiations, but we've closed out all our construction contracts. No negative audit findings, Measure D program. One of the things Joe White complained to me about was the books between the CM and the district never balanced. They were always off and it frustrated him. During Measure A, all our reports and cost reports balanced to the penny. I think Measure E is still the same. COC frankly has been a joy to work with here. They've had no negative findings. They're very supportive, ask hard questions that we've apparently had the answers for. And they've all had positive reports to the district. And we're going to complete the entire project list despite the pandemic and unprecedented construction cost escalation. This is a chart that you've seen before. This is what we had to deal with as far as construction cost escalation. This is the 25 years of the San Francisco Building Construction Cost Index produced by Engineering News Record magazine. You can see when we passed the bond, and you can see what construction escalation did after that. We didn't plan for that. We didn't expect it. Yet with everything we did, we survived it and we're still able to get the program done. This is a blow up of the program. And the reason why it didn't hurt us as badly as it's hurt other construction programs passed at the same time is that we hit the ground running. We bid out a third of the program within 1 year of passing Measure E. And then within another 2 years, we did another third. And that was just when the real serious construction escalation started. It hit us bad on the classroom modernizations and View High School expansion project, which got delayed for well over a year with DSA issues, as you know. But 2/3 of the program really were not affected by this historic cost escalation because we hit it hard. And you guys made decisions quickly and did construction as fast as the schools could tolerate. And if those projects got delayed just 1 year, I calculate that would have cost an additional $23 million. So it's due diligence in managing the program. They're say about $23 million. Program management support, we're well within the budget. Today, 3.1 million has been spent on program management. My team, my group spent about three quarters of that. It's currently budgeted at 5 million, which is 1.5% of, I think we're estimating around 330 million now for the program. Originally, it was budgeted at 4.2 million when the program was 8 years and $300 million. Now it's going to be about 9.5 years. Honestly, I think we're still going to stay within the original budget of 4.2 million. Our run rate looks good. We're constantly revisiting it as the program winds down. How much you need us to do those activities for you will diminish. One final thing before questions. I've probably got the best compliment I've ever got in my entire career from Susan Sweeley, who many of you know. She's a long-term board member here, board member through the entire Measure A program. And I think we're doing a presentation on wrapping up the Measure A program. And she simply said, she was board president at the time, she simply said, man, we got all this great construction and you guys made it look so easy. And I told her, that's probably the best compliment I've ever gotten in my career. I assure you it wasn't easy, but I'm glad that it looked that way to you guys. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
In the interest of time, I'd like to just go ahead and make the motion.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the annual agreement with Cumming Group to provide Measure E bond program support services for 25-26.
Second.
Moved by Catherine, seconded by Theta. Board, all in favor?
Aye.
Sincerely, thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you so much. Okay. Lastly, board operations. As we wrap up tonight. Board suggestions for future board meetings.
I just want to say this, that I already mentioned it to a couple people, but not board, but like to Eric, but I would like to have it in the record that I asked for like a SPED matrix, a matrix of all the outside providers that we use for students in special ed, how many students we have there, et cetera. Kind of matches a lot of the things that are the contracts that we're renewing for special ed that we did in consolidated motion. So a presentation or a report on that at some point.
Oh, and one more. I'm curious about, or not curious, I'm asking that, given the presentation of the students tonight on how to better to do grading and transparency and alignment, that we consider some of the recommendations, especially the low-hanging fruit ones, which seemed pretty obvious, some of them to the group, and see how do we incorporate that. It can be part of the alignment efforts or anything else, but I think that's a worthwhile effort to engage in.
+1.
So hopefully this can be a report once we come to conclusions.
Let me think on that. What's reportable is what's actually actionable as far as how we forward within the confines of the contract, the
Yeah.
law, things of that nature. I think it's a little bit more entailed than a report. We got the report, I think, how we use the student's report, how we do some of the things that we see as being, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking more for the actions and a report that's just a means of communication or what actions are we planning to take.
I agree with Alex.
But I do want to analyze the root causes for what students are saying. Students, I think, were directed to look at the specific grading policy as suggestions, but in reality, what is interesting is to see what are the challenges that students have presented to us, right? And how we offer a solution to those challenges, something that we can come up with, given the various constraints that you guys highlighted, which I think is really unfortunate for our students. Never in my life I would imagine that I'd be hearing telling a student that we contractually cannot do this or that. It's just, but it's a reality of life. Yet I think it's important to understand what their challenges are.
And I think as a follow-on to what the dean said is what are the barrier, like, it's clear that some teachers are doing this and some aren't. So it's good, it would be good to hear feedback from the teachers as to what the barriers are. You know, maybe they just don't understand its impact on students. Because I believe all the teachers that I've moved, are teachers care passionately about our students. So, and we do pay very well. So I'm not thinking that these teachers are like, oh, like it's extra work, so I don't want to do it. I'm thinking it's more like does it actually benefit the student to put in that extra time?
To
So it
summarize,
sounds like there's a follow-up around before, I guess, the action, understanding a little bit more some of the root causes for those suggestions is what I think maybe what you're
I'd
getting.
say problems that they sort of shared recommendations, but they're driven by the problems they observed, which were not really in the presentation, but they were shared throughout the talk, where I summarize what the problems are, what the root causes of the problems are, and what we can actually actionably address. And the teacher feedback on why they are or not doing certain practices. Yeah.
Lack of timely grading is a well-known issue, and like something that I completely understand. And because grading is meant to tell the students how they're doing and to provide them with an assessment which is in support of their development. I'm pretty sure that no teacher is having fun grading students, but the value of it is there, right? If the students are not getting that value ahead of the next test, they cannot prepare for the test, and a lot of it has to do with how are you being evaluated. Like I work with my kids a lot on, it's not just about what you know, it's also how you present that information, and you have to adjust your presentation based on expectations. How do they learn that if they're not getting that feedback? So we do need to understand like what can we do to support the teachers to provide that type of feedback. But that I believe is indeed a real issue.
I'm not disagreeing with any of you, but as we're talking about certain things in terms of mandating as it relates to the workday, those are all things that have to be negotiated in terms of the alignment of rubrics, getting rid of biases, and so on. You get into those pedagogical discussions with certain teachers. A lot of that is staff development, training, collaborative time, things of that nature, discussions around observations, evaluations, California standards for the teaching profession as it relates to assessment. There are multiple ways of going around that. Somewhat effective at best. And this is why this is such a big push, and this is why districts are spending countless hours working with him. Some are doing it poorly and just saying, okay, let's do what the book says. Some districts are actually looking at it over time and trying to get teachers to look at these grading practices and incorporate it within the context of their classes. It's let me think about how we present some of these things in the future. What you're asking is why don't teachers grade on time? I mean, what's the root cause of that?
I would just say that I get it that we're going to look into it at quite a few levels, and I get that there are issues both education code and labor agreement wise, and a lot else going on. But I feel confident that the district is working towards us being better at this, and will bring forward some recommendations of which things to do first and some things we can do. And the low hanging fruit was a very good phrase that we used earlier in the discussion. So I think we could suffice it to say that for now and work on it some more later.
Yeah, I agree. Just to add on to what Catherine said, which I agree with entirely, it's a negotiation, as she mentioned, and it's student focused. I mean, the students were the ones that came and talked about their stress, and I think that is really the driving force is student mental health and well-being. And if what's currently happening is causing undue stress, and I don't know, I've only heard from these students, but I think there are many ways you could get more student input. You could do a survey. I mean, whatever makes sense to help the teachers understand that this is coming from students and it's not coming from the board or from you. It's actually the students came and presented to us. So the problems they're having. And I also mentioned that I keep reading about it in both papers. Students come and talk to me about it. This is not new information to me. It's just presented in a very coherent way. And maybe just having teachers watch the video and see the students talking about their experiences. There's some simple questions like why a test that's the same test has different timing periods. That to me, I don't understand that. And I mean, the teacher presumably has the same time in the class, so that's not even requiring the teacher to do extra work other than sit there and proctor the test. So.
Okay. So I think Eric's gonna work with you probably to figure out what that presentation or update needs to be in a future meeting.
This really is correspondence. The one thing that I'd like to communicate is I'd like to thank Bob and Amy a lot. Earlier tonight, we had the county committee come in and look at our trustee area resolution. They gave us a little bit of an outline of what they were expecting in terms of having their meeting here. And Bob and Amy dropped everything that they were doing to try to assist them in getting their meeting started. So that it was, I appreciate it greatly, and it worked out because we were able to get our trustee area maps, approved by the county committee.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Bob. Any legislative update?
State legislature and the governor are a long ways away from an agreement on the budget, and they got a week to fix it.
Okay. Nothing else? Okay, next board meeting is next Monday, June 16th. Here in the boardroom. And we will not be resuming closed session. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move. I second.